Madame le Connétable de Saint-Laurent. Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Brelard.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de la Trinité.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Martin.
Présente.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Clément.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Grouville.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Ouen. Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Sauveur.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Southern. Madame le Deputy Labbé.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Tadier.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Luce. Madame le Deputy Dublé.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Morel. Madame le Deputy Lehegara. Monsieur le Deputy Ayer. Monsieur le Deputy Ward.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Alves. Madame le Deputy Gardner.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Gorse.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Farnham.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Moore.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Mezek.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Ozef. Monsieur le Deputy Balash.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Coles.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Poré. Monsieur le Deputy War.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Miles.
Présente.
Madame le Deputy Scott.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Renouf. Madame le Deputy Curtis. Madame le Deputy Feltham.
Présente.
Madame le Deputy Binet.
Présente.
Madame le Deputy Jeune. Madame le Deputy Miller.
Présente.
Madame le Deputy Howell.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Binet. Monsieur le Deputy Ferry.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Kovac.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Curtis. Madame le Deputy Ward.
Présente.
Madame le Deputy Wilson.
Présente.
Madame le Deputy Stevenson.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Andrews.
Monsieur le doyen.
Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait le ciel et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi le gouvernement et la puissance de la terre, pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir les cœurs et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, de la conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit, que toute leur délibération est accompagnée de ta bénédiction. Réussisse au bien-être et au soulagement du peuple, qu'il te plut de commettre à leurs soins. Car nous t'en prions au nom et par les mérites de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné de t'invoquer en disant: Notre Père, qui est aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite sur la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous envoie point en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car à toi la règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Sir, could I ask the Connétable be declared excused there? She's dealing with the death of a close relative.
Members content to mark the Connétable excusé. Excusé.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Ouen.
Malade.
Vous jurez que Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Ouen est tellement indisposé qu'il ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé. Monsieur le Deputy Southern.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Alves. Vous jurez que Madame le Deputy Alves est tellement indisposée qu'elle ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé. Monsieur le Deputy Joseph. Madame le Deputy Jeune.
Deputy Jeune is trapped in France by the inclement weather of the last few days. Her ferry was cancelled and she can't get back until tomorrow. It's a trip that I believe was booked well before the weather was forecast, so I ask that she be marked excusez.
Members content to mark Deputy Jeune excusez. Les états sont constitués.
Sir.
Sir, may I?
We'll start with the Constable St John.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I'd just like to inform the Assembly that I have to attend a funeral later this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Deputy Dublé, was that you in the ether?
Yes, thank you, sir. I just wanted to inform the Assembly that as I have a medical appointment mid-morning, I may need some flexibility around my question, which is due to fall probably mid-morning.
Thank you very much for that. On behalf of members, I'd like to welcome His Excellency to the Chamber this morning. We now turn to the consolidated order paper. There are a number of subordinate enactments under B, a number of documents presented or laid under C. The following matters have been lodged under D. P51, Proposed Budget Government Plan 2025 to 28, Amendment Increase Grants to States Funds, lodged on the 23rd of September by Deputy Balash. P57, Social Security Medical Appeal Tribunal Appointment of Members Amendment, lodged on the 19th of September by the Minister for Social Security. P58, Income Support Medical Appeal Tribunal Appointment of Members Amendment, lodged on the 19th of September by the Minister for Social Security. P61, Capital Gains Tax on the Sale of Residential Property that is not a main residence Amendment, lodged on the 23rd of September by Deputy Andrews. P62, Draft Social Security Law Payments into Social Security Fund, Jersey Amendment Regulations, lodged on the 16th of September by the Minister for Social Security. P63, Amendment to Standing Orders, Remote Participation in States Meetings, lodged on the 17th of September by the Privileges and Procedures Committee. P64, Gender Pay and Income Ratio Consultation, lodged on the 19th of September by Deputy Andrews. P65, Public Elections, Extension of Eligibility Criteria, lodged on the 26th of September by Deputy Taddeo. Under E, in accordance with Standing Order 34.1, the proposer of the following proposition, lodged au greffe, has informed the greffier of the states that it is to be withdrawn. P60, Westaway Trust, transfer of assets to Lyndon de Fay Trust, lodged on the 10th of September. Deputy Garda, your light's on. Not anymore. There are no appointments under F, no matters under G, H or I in relation to written questions. Yes,
I would like to raise my concerns about answer to the written question, if it's now the time.
Yes, I was about to announce first the Deputy Jeune has indicated that she considers the answer provided to written question 276 to be not relevant to her question, and understanding order 12.4b, a ruling will be made before 9:30 a.m. tomorrow on that issue. Yes, Deputy Gardner.
I would like also to raise the response to written question 311, which required calculations, and there is not sufficient information and answer for this question. That's 311.
Thank you very much. You'll receive a ruling by 9:30 tomorrow morning. Yes, Deputy Ward.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I'm not happy with the response to written question 315. I specifically asked for social housing providers who'd been issued licences, and there's no mention of that in the answer.
You'll receive a ruling by 9:30 tomorrow. Thank you for that. We now come to oral questions on notice, and I invite Deputy Ward to put the first question to the Minister for Infrastructure. Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. Papers lined up. Sorry, excuse me, sir, just 1 second. Here we go. Or question mark. So, will the Minister advise whether the CCTV system at the Arf Depart Lido is currently working, and if it is not, will he advise how long the system has been out of service and confirm when CCTV will be restored?
Minister.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for the question and also for his time last week when we discussed the future of Arf Depart. And I'm grateful for the notice he gave me then of this question. We share similar aspirations for the site, sir. So the CCTV operated by Jersey Property Holdings at Arf Depart, located on the restaurant, is not currently working and will need to be replaced. And I've asked that this matter is dealt with as a priority. Issues were first identified and resolved in March, but the system was again found not to be working in June. There is other operational CCTV in the area which can be redirected to cover different areas, including the road and the Lido. And as promised when we met last week, I commit to keeping the Deputy updated on this and other related matters. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Supplementary.
Yes, sir. Given that the States of Jersey Police maintain all the CCTV cameras in the Arf Depart area, would it not make sense for them to take over the running of the Lido cameras so that this area can be better supported by their officers? Are there any reasons why this situation cannot be changed before the end of this year?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. It's not something that I've considered, sir, but it's something I'm willing to consider. So we're currently reviewing all of our CCTV and are actually in the process of going out for offers to tender for our CCTV. That is why there's been some delay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. Would the Minister advise if he is aware if there is any liability or any insurance challenges that we might need to be aware that mitigated by working CCTV?
So I'm not aware of any implications to our insurance, whether there is or isn't CCTV. Thank you, sir.
Deputy War, final supplementary.
No, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Question 2, Deputy Catherine Curtis will ask for the Minister for the Environment. Deputy Curtis.
Thank you, sir. Further to the response to written question 270/2024, will the Minister consider reprioritising the progress of the Food Jersey Law 2023 regulations, including the labelling of allergens in food, given that restaurants and cafes in Jersey, unlike in the UK, the EU and the USA, do not have to provide allergen information? And if not, will he explain why?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to thank the Deputy for her question. We've been talking about this issue for quite some time. Like her, sir, and every member of the Assembly, I'm keen to progress the subordinate legislation under the Food Jersey Law 2023 as soon as possible. My officers have already commenced work on moving this legislation forward. I have prioritised this work. I continue to prioritise it, and so that these laws can, subject to the approval of this Assembly, come into effect in 2025.
Supplementary.
So, could the Minister confirm whether law drafting is underway yet?
Minister.
Sir, I can't confirm that to the Deputy at the moment, so it would be wrong of me to say one way or the other.
Deputy Sadia.
Will the Minister confirm whether businesses that provide fresh food or sell hot food like pasties, etc., will be covered by this law, and will consumers be able to know what's in those products that they're buying?
Minister.
Yes, sir, those changes will be covered. It's important that we get all these laws right for Jersey. They have to be fit for purpose, workable, and deliver what they're intended to do. Once my officers have working with law drafters, and I'll confirm back to the Deputy officially where we are, I'll be sharing these with stakeholders, including the Deputy Scrutiny Panel and the Food Allergy Group, and for reason, comment and revision, and if appropriate, bringing them back to the Assembly.
Supplementary. When the Minister says they'll be covered, does he mean that there will be a requirement for those types of food to be explicitly labelled with allergens and ingredients, or will will there be an exemption for that type of food?
Minister.
So it's my belief that there will be no exemptions, and that if there are allergens, and there's a number of allergens, 14 I believe, which need to be covered, those will have to be listed.
Deputy Southern.
Thank you, sir. Can the Minister give any estimate of when we might be seeing sort of laws change or regulations change around this area of the law?
Minister.
Sir, I can't, other than to say and repeat that I gave in my first answer, which the Deputy may have heard, that it's my priority and subject to the approval of this Assembly, that will come into effect in 2025.
Supplementary.
I'll try and be more specific then, sir, than I have been so far. When can we see, is his estimate of when we can see this legislation?
Minister.
Well, I'm not going to make promises that I can't keep to, sir, but in the basis that this will be passed in 2025, I imagine that the Deputy will have something to look at early in the new year.
Deputy Balash.
So 2025 has 12 months in it. Could the Minister indicate if the instructions are not yet with the Law Drafting Office, when precisely they will be?
Minister.
So if they're not yet with the law drafting, they will be as soon as possible, but I need to just remind the Assembly that there's lots of things to consider here. New labelling requirements are one important aspect of the regulations, but there's other elements that are necessary to bring the food laws up to date, and those include the licensing of food businesses, enhanced food hygiene and food safety requirements, and indeed the rules around the enforcement itself.
Supplementary.
Can the Minister really not give any specific indication of when the instructions will be with the Law Drafting Office?
Minister.
I can't, sir, and I can only apologise to the Assembly for not having more information on this issue. We have spent some time and will continue to do so in the coming weeks about the prioritisation of the amount of time we have with law drafters. I believe all ministers have been asked that question. There's no point in this government setting out a whole list of things we intend to do to find in a few months' time that we don't have time to do that. So we're reprioritising the amount of time we have with law drafters and making sure that those top priorities are actually given the time needed. But again, I apologise to the Assembly for not having more information about this specific subject, and I will get back to everybody and let them know exactly where we are.
Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. Very unfortunate, this August, 13-year-old girl died after a sip of Costa Coffee hot chocolate, which has milk, due to the failure to follow allergies processes, as was reported follow the incident. What actions, training, checks can be done during the next 6, 8, 12 months before the law will come in place to minimise the risk of these incidents in Jersey?
Minister.
So there's a number of things my officers can do and are doing to try to make sure that while we wait for the updated law to come in, that members of the public are covered. And I would say to the Deputy that despite the lack of specific legislation, it's nevertheless illegal for businesses in Jersey to falsely claim a product does not contain a specific food product. This includes the 14 allergens that I referred to before, and we have successfully prosecuted one food business under the charge of selling food which was not of the nature demanded by the purchaser.
Supplementary.
Okay, thank you.
Final supplementary, Deputy Curtis.
I thank the Minister for his answers and look forward to the confirmation about the law drafting time. Would the Minister agree that the current reliance on international legislation, which covers imported food, leaves a huge gap of unregulated food in Jersey, potentially resulting in injury or death to local residents and visitors?
Minister.
Well, it's unfortunate that we're not up to quite the same speed as the UK or the EU, sir. I can't agree with the Deputy that there's a huge gap. There is a gap, and it's one that we aim to fill as soon as we possibly can. But as I said, there are ways for us to make it better. We're doing that through encouragement, through other means, and it is illegal, as I said in the previous answer, to claim that something isn't contained in a certain food when it is actually there. So I can't agree wholeheartedly with the Deputy, but in the first part of her final question, I will get back to her and other members with a proper breakdown of where I am with the law drafting on this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Question 3, Deputy Ozef will put to the Minister for Housing. Deputy Ozef.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister detail what data is available to him regarding the total number of private sector rental properties available in Jersey, and whether or not he has any specific targets or benchmarks for what would constitute an acceptable number of such properties to meet islanders' needs? Sir.
Minister.
Thank you, sir, and thank Deputy Ozef for this question. The two main data sets that exist to give us a picture of how many private sector rental properties there are in Jersey are the census, which gives a breakdown by bedroom size and across all different types of tenure for housing in Jersey. But of course, the further away we get from that moment in time, the less of an actual picture that data set provides us. And we're aware that there have been several significant developments in that time, which will include private sector rental properties. We do also have the Renter Dwellings Licensing Scheme, which is still in its transitionary period, although as time goes on, we can begin to rely on that more as an accurate and up-to-date picture of how many private sector rental homes there are there. There's so far been over 17,000 licences given for those who have applied, which is not far off what we thought the picture was for private sector rental homes, so that hopefully that shows that it's working. In terms of targets or benchmarks for what would constitute an acceptable number of properties to meet islanders' needs, so I don't have a figure like that, and I actually don't think it would be useful for me to come up with a figure like that, because the passage of time would extremely quickly make it irrelevant, and it would constantly be a moving target. We have, from Statistics Jersey, the Jersey's Future Housing Needs report, which gives breakdowns of what types of homes, what sizes of homes we would need into the years in the future based on particular population growth scenarios. So there's a series of different pictures. But the one thing that doesn't bear in mind is potential policy changes which would change what the need for private sector rental homes is. So if we built too much social housing, I'd want to widen the gateway criteria even further, and that would therefore reduce the need for private sector rental homes. I want us to have more schemes to support first-time buyers, and every private renter you turn into a first-time buyer, that's one less private sector rental home that you would need. So for what I would consider an acceptable number, that will always be a moving number, and so I don't think it's useful for me as a minister to give that kind of number, but I hope that answer is helpful to the Deputy.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. I'm grateful for the Minister's answer, and I will. There's a number of supplementaries that follow. It's probably better done in written form. So the first supplementary that I wish to ask is, the Minister kindly mentioned the number of 17,000 homes that are on the new registered scheme for rentals. Could you please explain where that data comes from, because it's a surprising number based upon the dwelling house loan statistics, which he quite rightly says, which there was an expected number of 10,739 qualified private rentals, etc. Maybe he misspoke.
So he certainly did misspeak, because of course that number that I gave also includes social housing units, so I apologise for not separating those two numbers when giving that.
So I don't know whether that's put me off my train of thought, sir, because 17,000 is the wrong figure.
You've had your supplementary.
Fine, but it was on an erroneous information.
Well, do you want to give the correct figure? Do you have it?
So that the equivalent figure that I would have from the census would have about just under 11,000 qualified private sector rental homes, which goes up to closer to 15,000 when you include unqualified and staff accommodation and that kind of thing as well. But yeah, I apologise for misspeaking in my previous answer.
Deputy Andrews.
Thank you, sir. The number of qualified private rental units stood at 7,806 in 2011, and that number increased in 2021 to 10,739 units, representing a 38% percentage change increase. So does the Minister believe that this increase is acceptable, and if not, why not?
Minister.
So those figures are correct. That's what happened between 2011 and 2021, and for that period in our history, an increase in 38% in qualified private rental homes will have had some impact in helping satisfy demand for housing in the island. But I've been clear, I would like Jersey eventually to get to a point where social rental housing surpasses private rent as the second biggest tenure of housing on the island, with, of course, occupation being the first part of that. So in the coming years, I would like to see the increase predominantly with social housing rent. In that same time period, the total number of social rental homes only increased by 3%, and that would be where my priority would be in future.
Supplementary?
Sorry, sir, I think Deputy Joseph Slight just came on.
Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do, yes. Yeah. So can the Minister for Housing confirm what percentage change increase would be desirable for social housing units, and when would he look to introduce such a figure, and when would that objective be set? Thank you, sir.
Minister.
Again, sir, it's not a clear timetable or clear number that I'm putting on. It's more of a high aspiration that I'd like us to get to that point. Andium have been very effective in the last few years in planning to build more homes. So if we wanted to get social housing to surpass qualified private rent without actually reducing the number of qualified private rent homes at the moment, that would require a jump in 100%, which is obviously very ambitious and probably not deliverable, which is why I'm not saying it ought to be a target set in stone, but more of an aspiration for us to eventually get to. It's not the kind of thing you achieve in a short period of time. It's the kind of thing that might take decades, but it is where I'd like us to get to, and Andium are certainly very capable at helping us deliver that.
Deputy Taddeo.
Thanks. So does the Minister have to hand a rough estimate of what support is given to private landlords for people who can't afford their private rentals? And I'll leave that as my first question, sir.
Minister.
So if the Deputy's asking about income support that's paid out to tenants who live in the private sector to assist them with their rent, I believe the figure is somewhere within the region of £9 to £10 million a year.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Obviously, that 9 to 10 million will ultimately go to private landlords. Does the Minister believe that it would be much better spent if some, or indeed the aspiration of all of that money, were going to Andium, which is entirely state-owned, so the money could be recycled, rather than going into the pockets of private landlords paid for by the Jersey taxpayer?
Minister.
The short answer to that is I agree, and the Treasury Minister and other officials in the Treasury Department will know that I'm very often saying to them that I would want Andium to keep as much of its return that it provides to Treasury, which is in the region of about £30 million a year. Of course, the more of that they can keep, the more that they can do, the more that they can develop, and the less that we may need to rely on private sector rent for housing those people, and that's the aspiration I want to get to.
Deputy Iyer.
Thank you, sir. The Minister mentioned policy changes in his initial answer. Does the Minister know if the availability of private rental properties decreased since the rise in stamp duty for such properties was introduced? Thank you.
Minister.
No. Since that increase was introduced, though, it does enable Statistics Jersey to track now how many homes are being bought for the purpose of letting them out, which they weren't easily able to do before. I'm not aware of a recent estimate that they've produced of how many private rental homes there are now versus what it was 2 years ago before that surcharge was introduced. But it is the case that there are still homes being bought that are for the purpose of letting out, where the buyer is just paying the stamp duty and getting on with it. The numbers, of course, have reduced in how many of those, we presume the numbers have reduced in terms of how many of those transactions are happening, but some are still happening, so there are still some people buying properties to let them out.
Supplementary? Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. I think from the numbers that we were quoted earlier, I could probably work it out myself by listening back, but for clarity, is it possible for the Minister to say of the private sector rentals, what proportion are considered unqualified or licensed, and does the Minister consider this to be sufficient?
Minister.
So the number I gave was about half the amount, and that will include that includes different types of unqualified accommodation. So some of that will be staff accommodation, some of that will be lodging houses, etc. Let's be frank, there's a shortage of registered accommodation, and that's making life difficult for some people who are coming to the island who aren't granted housing status through some other means. So we do need to have conversations about whether we ought to be actively delivering new registered accommodation. I've had some conversations with the States Jersey Development Company to see if there are ways that that can be incorporated into some of their future plans, or we can find mechanisms to reduce our reliance on registered housing by helping those who currently have registered status get some kind of status to be able to access the qualified private rental market. But if we're going to do that, we've got to be very careful about it and make sure that we've gone through the numbers and modelled what kind of impact it might have depending on how far we go. So we're not in a position yet to say exactly how far we would go, but work is being done behind the scenes to model that to see if there are tweaks we can make.
Supplementary?
Yes, please, sir. And the Minister must have read my mind for what my follow-up question was going to be about the, does he believe that steps should be actively taken to increase the demand, the supply there? I am slightly confused about which way the Minister's policy preference would sit there. Could he perhaps expand on that? Does he believe that we should be changing policy and creating more unqualified units?
Minister.
So I don't see it as either or, partly for the reason that because of the Controlling of Housing and Work law, there hasn't been a lot of new registered accommodation provided in that time because of the limits that there are on it, which means as time goes by, the registered accommodation that we have in Jersey becomes aged and not as nice as the newest homes that are built. So I'm absolutely in favour of being able to build some more so that we can have nicer homes for people to come and live in if they have registered status. But at the same time, there are tweaks we can make to our system of entitled status that could make it more accessible to the rental market for some of those who come to the island. I'm cautious that that's got to be done carefully so we don't overwhelm any part of the market, but I want to see both happen, but they are, of course, very different mechanisms.
Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. And I'm grateful for Minister to share his aspirations, and I would like to probe it a bit further. Would the Minister advise if a world without private sector landlords is his long-term aspiration?
Minister.
No.
Supplementary? Thank you. Deputy Kovacs.
Thank you, sir. From the response the Minister gave to Deputy Andrews on the balance of private properties built comparing with the social housing, from the recent fiscal policy report on housing, we've seen that there's no social housing built in Trinity and St. John's. Are there any plans to build any there?
Minister.
So she's caught me slightly off guard. I cannot remember exactly what sites were allocated in the Bridging Island plan for new homes in those. I believe that there are some, and I know the Constable St John's keen to show me around some. We were meant to go yesterday, but were put off by the weather. But that there are, and I wasn't on island because of the weather, I could say as well, so that's an even better alibi. I believe that there are some looking at in those parishes, and I'm happy to keep up to date with the constables of those parishes to make sure we get the best out of them.
Thank you. Supplementary? Deputy Banash. Deputy Banash.
So is the Minister not able to give a specific number
of licensed rental properties rather than a rounded 17,000? And of that number, can he state how many were inspected for compliance with standards before a licence was granted?
Information, sir, the number was not 17,000 as corrected by the Minister.
I think the Minister can answer the question himself.
No,
Yes.
the Deputy Balish's question was about the licensing scheme, which includes both, and that exact number as of yesterday is 17,525. As for the number that have actually been inspected, I'm delighted to tell the Deputy that that scheme is actually not within my ministerial remit. It is for the Environment Minister, who is probably more up to date on that than I am, but I've been given high-level numbers for helping to answer these questions.
Final supplementary, Deputy Joseph.
Sir, the purpose of my question related to what I understand to be the colloquial understanding of private sector rental properties, therefore not social housing, and whilst you've allowed quite understandably, sir, questions in relation to unqualified housing, my oral question related to the understanding of social rented private sector rentals. And can I just summarise, to be absolutely clear, the Minister is saying that he does not know how many private sector rental properties are currently available, whether that has changed, and in Deputy Ayer's answers, in the answers he gave to Deputy Ayer, he doesn't know whether the stamp duty and other changes has made a difference. And finally, can he confirm that what he said was that he wanted the number of private sector rental properties to reduce?
Yes, sir.
Sir, I want as many islanders as possible to be able to buy the homes that they live in so that they don't need to rely on private sector rent. So I think that most islanders would consider that an appropriate direction of travel, but there will always be a need for private sector rent in some shape or form, and we ought to have the best offer as possible for those for whom that is appropriate. But I want to support islanders into buying their own home, and I want to support our social housing providers into providing more and better accommodation so that we can widen the gateway as much as possible. And we've already been doing lots of that. If the Deputy wants to make an intervention.
My question related to the private sector market, not social rented, sir. I'm asking about the private sector rental market. And so any answers that relate to growing the supply of other things is maybe interesting, but my question related to what the Minister's policy is for the private sector rental market. And his answers are displaying that he wants to reduce it, but he doesn't want to say it.
Sir, he asked a number of questions in his final supplementary that crossed a wide variety of issues, and if he doesn't think that me saying what the place of social housing in our wider housing offer is relevant, then I don't think he understands his own question that he asked, sir, because of course it's relevant what proportions of different tenures are on offer, and whether we have more or less private rental, the answer of whether we have more or less social rental is completely relevant in answering that question. So I would like us to get to a situation where there is less need for private sector rental accommodation because more islanders have been able to afford to own their home. That is an aspiration I believe most Jersey people have, and one which I believe in and support. Part of his final supplementary question asked about knowing the exact availability of private sector rental accommodation at the moment. So I don't know what the exact number is because it's constantly moving. Some people decide at one moment in time, even if they own surplus properties, that they're not going to be offering them. There are developments that are being built all the time, that some of which have been bought, that are being put out to let. We can go on places.je if we like and see how many private sector rental homes are available at the moment. So it's a constantly moving number, so I can't put an exact one on it, but we've got various different data sources that help us give a picture.
So may I raise a point of order? I note that Deputy Joseph very skillfully managed to get a second supplementary, which should have been his final.
Well, he was asking for, I think, his point was that he hadn't had an answer to the questions he was asked. Or at least that was what I thought he was going to make.
So could I ask, in that case, there should be a point of order to say, I don't think my question's been answered correctly, and then wait for the ruling from the chair. Otherwise, I think, you know, the premise will be that we have two final supplementaries, which I think is incorrect.
It is, you're right. Thank you very much.
Point of order, sir. I made a very clear question.
This isn't a point of order, though, is it?
Well, I want to make a point of order, sir. Could you please rule whether or not, maybe after consideration, whether or not the question was answered in the way in which it was framed? Because you've allowed a number of supplementaries, sir, which don't relate to actually the underlying purpose of the question. And I understand why there's some confusion, but I was quite clear, I thought. And I would welcome some advice about how this could be conducted properly, because my answer still remains unclear.
A lot of questions were asked arising from the original question, and overall, on balance, my view is that your questions were answered. Question 4, Deputy I will put to the Minister for Treasury and Resources.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister advise whether she intends to implement all of the recommendations contained in the Jersey Fiscal Policy Panel 2024 Annual Report, and if not, will she indicate which will now be progressed and not be progressed, and explain why? Thank you, sir.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the FPP report was only issued on the 24th of September, a week ago today, and it's important that the recommendations are properly considered and a deliverability assessed before I can make any firm commitments. I think it's fair to say that we have set out strategies in our current budget to address some of those recommendations, and the panel have welcomed some of the approaches taken in this budget. Some of the recommendations, however, will have to be implemented through future budgets, and so whilst I might recommend them, it's a matter for the Council of Ministers and indeed the wider Assembly, and indeed possibly future assemblies. For example, the FPP recommend restraint in current spending, and the Council of Ministers has clearly stated our ambition to curb the growth in public service expenditure. However, all members have a part to play in this. Our efforts to constrain expenditure would be undermined by amendments to the budget that result in greater expenditure and greater deficits. We're extremely fortunate to have individuals of such high calibre on the Fiscal Policy Panel, and I would emphasise the value that I put on their advice. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the panel again for their ongoing work, and in particular for this report. Thank you.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. The Minister in a response did not mention inflation. The FPP report states that there's an emerging signs that domestically generated inflation may become more entrenched. A budget that increases the growth in day-to-day spending is likely to push up inflation. What actions is the Minister taking to slow her expansionary fiscal policy over the coming year, and will she be addressing this in her final budget next year? Thank you, sir.
Minister.
Sir, I don't agree that the budget is in any way, expansionary. The Council of Ministers and the Government has set out a clear ambition to curb growth in the public sector. We have a clear plan to do that. It must be balanced against immediate pressures, and we are absolutely cognisant of the impact of additional spending on inflation, and that is why we are trying to reduce it. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. I have compared a government plan that we voted here in December 23, an allocation to transfer to Central Reserve that we decided to do in 2025. That time we voted for 62,188 to transfer to Central Reserve. What's happened with the new budget that's been launched? You're asking, the Council of Ministers asking to transfer 34 million, which is a reduction of 45% of transfer to Central Reserve compared to what we decided a year ago. Would the Minister consider to bring an amendments and to increase transfer to Central Reserve based on the latest report of FFP?
Minister.
Sir, I don't have the budget in front of me. I can't remember that particular point. The Central Reserve, I think, covers a number of things, and if it is reduced, it is again in line with trying to reduce spending and addressing a prudent approach. If she would like to confirm the data, I can respond to her separately, but I don't have the budget in front of me, and I don't have a photographic memory of it. Thank you.
Supplementary.
Absolutely, and I would welcome clarification why our transfers to Central Reserve would be reduced by 45%. But would Minister, what steps, if any, Minister would consider to take in 2025 to increase our central reserve?
Minister.
Sir, we already have. If our budget for this year will set out transfers to Central Reserve, that is our budget for 2025. Further reserves for future years will be considered over the course of next year. I'm afraid I'm struggling to understand the question. The Central Reserve is a reserve, I believe, to meet inflation and central costs. It's not the strategic reserve and stabilisation fund, which I believe is the focus of the FPP work. Thank you.
Deputy Andrews.
Thank you, sir. If the government is not deploying fiscally expansionary policies, is the government deploying fiscally contractionary policies? Thank you, sir.
Minister.
No, sir, I don't believe we are. The message is very clear from the public and indeed now from the FPP that we must try to limit current spending. Now, that is a difficult thing to do because everybody wants us to spend money. Now, ministers, we have focused very clearly in the 2025 budget on the CSP and delivering things that will have an immediate impact. We have reprioritised other spending, and departments have been asked to prioritise the matters that are most important to them. We are not withdrawing services. We are continuing to focus on the important services that the public need. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. So, is the focus on maintaining the size of the government, or is it about seeing a reduction in the size of the public sector? Thank you, sir.
Minister.
I think we're confusing several elements, sir. We are focused on reducing the size of the public sector. We have been clear about that. This is now turning into a question about the budget and not the FPP report. But we have been very clear that we are trying to reduce numbers of... we're trying to reduce the amount of reliance on consultants, for example. We are reducing extraneous layers of management. We have already discussed that. We have a recruitment freeze to try and stop additional recruitment. We have cancelled a large number of jobs that are sitting there unfilled and unfunded. So we are trying to reduce spend while still providing essential services. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Joseph.
Thank you, sir. Remaining strictly within the oral question that Deputy A asked, the Minister wasn't entirely clear. Is she planning to produce a report on the Fiscal Policy Panel's 2024 annual report? And can she confirm, and again, I've asked this and other members have asked this, will she explain and provide a detail of the reports that are going to come out before the budget, including the FPP, any amendments or reports?
Minister.
Sir, we will respond to the FPP report, but I'm not anticipating issuing any further reports. I have said again, if the Deputy would like me to direct me to the reports that he feels previous governments have issued that we have not, we will consider that, but I am not going to create reports where none have previously been issued. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister kindly say when she will be providing, or the Council Ministers will be providing, their report on the FPP 2024 annual report? When it will be provided?
No, sir, I don't have a time scale for that just at the moment.
Deputy Moore.
Thank you, sir. The Minister balked somewhat at Deputy Ayer's description of the budget as an expansionary budget. But if I could quote from the FPP's analysis of the budget that we are to consider in November, they say that there is a 3% increase in expenditure of 103 million over 2025 to 2027 compared to the government plan of 2024. This is net of a proposed saving programme worth £47 million per annum. Does the Minister disagree with this finding of the FPP?
Minister.
Sir, I believe that our spending is is less. There is an increase. Of course, there's an increase, but it is. But my recollection is, and I don't have the number in front of me. The budget, the increase in spending is about 5.4%, and the previous government plan was 9.4%. Thank you.
Supplementary.
How will the Minister deal with this position where she is at odds with the findings of the FPP, who say very clearly that there's a 3% increase on the previous government plan?
Minister.
Sir, I don't recall the previous government having a great deal of, did not necessarily respond fully to previous FPP reports. We produced the budget before the FPP report. We have tried to get that in early, and our response to the FPP report, which covers some very, very high level issues, will be developed over next year and the year after. Thank you.
Deputy Brenner.
Thank you, sir. The recommendation 3 of the FPP report says the panel recommends that further immediate action be taken to improve the balance of the stabilisation fund. This could take the form of a commitment to investing a proportion of cyclical tax revenues into the stabilisation fund, as well as a commitment to invest a proportion of upside Pillar 2 revenues. Will she commit the government to following that course of action?
Minister.
I'm not going to make a commitment here, sir, but the FPP have recognised our efforts to increase the stabilisation fund. They have welcomed that we have an intention to invest 41.6 million of our base case Pillar 2 revenues into the stabilisation fund, but neither the stabilisation fund cannot be increased overnight unless we did a significant cut in the delivery of public services. We have also said that we will invest surpluses of up to 25 million from the consolidated fund, and we will consider further investment of further revenues in due course as we see how Pillar 2 evolves. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary.
Yes, sir. I note that the panel says that it recommends further immediate action to improve the balance of the stabilisation fund. Can the Treasury Minister confirm that she is rejecting that recommendation?
Minister.
No, sir, I'm not rejecting it. We have said we have set out a plan. We will consider further what we can do, and all those members who are keen to curb. I'm hoping, therefore, that all members who are so keen in us building that fund and investing funds will not be bringing forward amendments to require further spending to this budget. Thank you.
Deputy Balash.
So does the Minister consider that plundering £20 million from the Social Security Fund to assist the introduction of the living wage is consistent with the recommendations of the Fiscal Policy Panel?
Minister.
The Deputy will know I disagree with his characterisation of plunder. There is no money being taken from that fund. The Fiscal Policy Panel did not discuss the Social Security Fund. They've discussed the Strategic Reserve and the Stabilisation Fund, which are quite different. Thank you.
Supplementary. Final supplementary, Deputy Ayer.
Thank you, sir. The panel highlights concerns about economic growth, concerns about productivity, concerns about inflation, concerns about house prices and the housing market generally, concerns about the labour market, concerns about strategic reserves and the stabilisation fund. What will the Minister do to assuage the FPP's concerns? And does she have any other concerns about our economic outlook herself that they may have missed? Thank you, sir.
Minister.
Sir, I don't think anybody's particularly surprised by the things that the FPP have said. We all know that we have to reduce spending, and that is what the budget of 2025 is aiming to do. It is set out a plan to increase our strategic reserve, and it has set out a plan to increase our stabilisation fund. We also, in the context of Pillar 2, that the FPP have indeed welcomed this government's approach to the handling of future Pillar 2 funds, and it is important that we continue to deal with that money carefully and cautiously, and not as a windfall that is there for the grabbing for any particular purpose that members have in mind. We must deal with that carefully, and that is part of our ongoing strategy, using those funds wisely to invest specifically in the ongoing economic productivity and competitiveness of this island. It is very important that going forward we continue to work on competitiveness of the island, and we again have set out a plan to utilise a significant proportion of our base case Pillar 2 funding that we anticipate into work on competitiveness of our island, so that people know Jersey is open for business and is ready to grow. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Question 5, Deputy Moore will put to the Minister for Health and Social Services. Deputy Moore.
Thank you, sir. Following the publication of the Getting It Right First Time Orthopaedics and Theatre Efficiency Review, will the Minister provide details of what progress, if any, has been made to meet the recommendations outlined in this review?
Minister.
Sir, I'm pleased to confirm that the Surgical Care Group, that's the group with responsibility for implementing the recommendations, has already prioritised them and has commenced work on 11 of the 36 which were made following the review. So I'd be very happy to furnish the Deputy with a copy of the priority list detailing the various elements of the work that are already in progress, if that would be helpful, sir.
Supplementary.
I thank the Minister for that offer and gratefully accept, as I'm sure will the Health and Social Security Scrutiny Panel. So the recommendations identify a need to have greater expertise in delivering system changes and driving greater efficiency. With the departure of the Chief Officer, is the Minister confident that he has the right skills in his management team?
Minister.
I think I have to say a straightforward yes to that. Thank you, sir.
Yes, Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. Recommendation 22 called for a rapid review of the ophthalmology pathway. Has that been started, and when can we expect that to be complete?
Minister.
Offhand, I couldn't say whether that's one of the 11 that started or not. I have to be honest with you, this is an efficiency review. It's a review of a department that actually has been highlighted as having notably good practice. And so it's not something that at this point in time takes up a huge amount of my concentration, sir, because there are other matters that are, in my view, more of a priority. So I can't answer that question, I'm afraid.
Supplementary.
Given that the question has been asked on the floor of the States Assembly, could I request that the information the Minister offered earlier is sent to all States members, please? And could I add to the question, because the recommendation 22 referred to cataracts, theatre appointments, is the Minister aware, are they currently ongoing in Jersey as well as those that are being undertaken in the UK?
My understanding that to a limited extent, sir, to the best of my knowledge.
Well, the other part of the question was, are you prepared to share that information
most
with all
certainly,
members? Yes, Deputy Moore, final supplementary?
No,
Oh, sorry, Deputy Gardner. Yes, Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. I would like to ask Minister what progress has been made for establishing a full multidisciplinary team for orthopedic surgery, which should include use of dedicated physio resources and full patient pathway.
Minister.
Now, as I say, sir, there are 11 of those recommendations already underway. I don't carry around with me an intimate knowledge of those areas. There's a good team at work there, and they're doing that. I mean, if there are a collection of people that are interested in this, I'm very happy to get the head of the surgical care group to give them a briefing if it's occupying a lot of people's concerns, sir.
Parliamentary?
Yeah, a bit different one. Would the Minister confirm if he had read the report?
Yes, I certainly have, sir.
Yes, Deputy Moore, final supplementary?
Thank you, sir. The Minister described this review as an efficiency review, which indeed it is. But he said that he has greater priorities than simply dealing with efficiency. Given that efficiency has an impact upon patient care and also cost, sir, what greater priorities does the Minister have, and how will he ensure that they are delivered to the benefit of the patients in our care?
I don't recall saying that I didn't consider efficiency to be a priority. In fact, as the Deputy will know, I'm trying to go through a redesign of the entire health service to make it more efficient. What I do know is that in large organisations, if you've got good people doing their job and they have an efficiency, some 36 efficiency recommendations, you generally tend to leave it to those people to implement those recommendations to make those efficiencies. So.
Thank you, Minister. Question 6 was Deputy Jones. Minister, are you content to answer that in writing? You content to answer that question? No, forgive me, on to question 6 now. Different Minister, my fault. Is the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development content to answer that question in writing?
Absolutely, no problem.
Thank you very much, Minister. Question 7, Deputy Wilson will ask of the Chief Minister. Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. Further to the annual savings detailed within the proposed budget government plan 2025 to 2028, will the Chief Minister advise the rationale and decision-making processes behind the determination of proposed savings and advise which heads of expenditure are to be targeted for reduction in order to achieve them?
Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. The budget includes £47 million of savings over the next 4 years and sets out both the rationale and how the savings have been apportioned. In recent years, members will know that public spending has been growing at unsustainable rates, and the budget includes steps to curb this growth. The Fiscal Policy Panel, in their most recent report, has also highlighted those challenges. This includes greater focus on reprioritising existing spending to deliver our CSP priorities as agreed by the Assembly. The budget was developed by the Council of Ministers in a series of workshops, some 10 in total. Decisions were agreed at these workshops and formally agreed as a package at the end of the process, which manifested in the budget. All departmental heads of expenditure are contributing to savings, but with more weighting towards offering protection to frontline services, sir. The savings are needed to curb growth in expenditure whilst funding our priorities and maintaining balanced public finances. Thank you.
Thank you. Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. I thank the Chief Minister for his answer, but would he consider improving the degree of transparency about his approach to improving public sector efficiency? We have limited detail on the risks associated with this approach, and we can't find any evidence of any ministerial plans that allow Assembly members to also consider and assess the impact of some of the suggestions and decisions that he's just referred to.
Chief Minister.
Well, sir, the details of where the savings proposed are clearly set out in detail in the budget, in great detail, almost line by line. Sir, the risks of not curbing the growth in our expenditure are far less than not curbing the growth in our expenditure, as highlighted in the Fiscal Policy Panel, sir. There's a lot of detail that's gone into this. Ministers continue to work with their officials on a daily basis, sir, to make sure we're managing public finances and reprioritising in a way that this government considers to be in the best interest in the island. And this government is open, sir, to providing more detail to States members whenever requested, sir. It's possibly more effective to write to us, sir, or come and see us. We'll have meetings, we'll arrange meetings for States members or groups of States members where they're specifically interested in certain details, sir, and that offer is, of course, remaining open for the duration of this government. Thank you.
Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. One of the proposals in his government plan or budget is for an area of savings is to reduce the spending on arts, heritage and culture and rescind the 1% for arts in that to reduce its budget effectively. Could I ask the Minister, in that decision-making process, was any consultation done with the arts, culture and heritage sector to tell them that in the next few years their budget will be reduced?
Chief Minister.
I'm sorry, I believe that question would be better directed to the Minister with responsibility for that, and I understand he is working very closely with that sector, sir. And the proposal in the budget, so by the way, I was a supporter of the 1% for art, but given the financial challenges we're facing in the future was to peg the 1% and apply RPI, cost of living, to it on an annual basis, rather than linking it to the total head of expenditure. So considering we've been seeing exponential growth in the cost of running the health service, for example, sir, we might see the 1% for our art being inflated to a level that was more than anticipated. So this is not an effort, sir, to try and curtail the spending to art. It's just a measure, sir, to keep it at what we think a realistic and very good, albeit very, very much increased level from when Deputy Tadier brought the original proposition.
So does the Minister accept that this example of a clear States decision in 2019, which is subtly being rescinded in this budget, is actually a wider example of a risk that his government is actually proposing cuts on the back of a substantial lack of consultation, first of all with the Assembly that voted for that, but also with the wider constituency and industry that is going to be experiencing those cuts?
Chief Minister.
No, I don't agree with that, sir, because in my view, sir, and I'm prepared to be corrected if I'm wrong, sir, as a cut is when you reduce spending in something. We're not planning to reduce our investment in the arts, which is incredibly important to the island, sir. On the contrary, we've seen significant growth in that sector. What we're trying to do in a lot of areas is curb the growth. And I'll explain that, sir. That means we're not going to allow the growth to be as much as it was previously forecast to be. So we're curbing the growth. That means we are not going to cut the funding. We're just going to increase it at a slightly more realistic level in relation to our finances, sir. And that is increasing it. That is pegging it at its current level and then applying cost of living to it every year. So it's not cutting it, sir, it's just curbing its growth there. Okay. Quite happy to keep explaining that until it actually sinks in, sir. Thank you.
Deputy Andrews.
Thank you, sir. In the last 5 government plans, there was 256 million approved in growth bids. I want to know whether the Chief Minister is going to do anything about this, and will he actually then increase the number of efficiencies in future government plans as well?
Chief Minister.
Well, so what we have decided to do is reduce the growth bids, the current growth bids in the 2024 budget by 20% to help curb the growth. So that is allowing 80% of the previously agreed growth to continue. Our budget, the budget we have lodged, I think dovetails into the current fiscal policy panel, because it's a plan that does curb growth. It starts to deliver savings. It starts to reduce the cost of staffing and reducing the number of roles. It deals with putting money into the stabilisation fund and the strategic reserve. But on the back of the fiscal policy panel report, which is very helpful, and it does remain positive about Jersey's strong financial position, but it's stark in other aspects of what we need to do. And on the back of that, we will pay careful attention to it, consider carefully what the response should be, sir. But I suggest, sir, we are going to have to, when we come to next year's budgeting, we are going to have to work that around more closely the advice of the fiscal policy panel.
Supplementary.
Sir, there was mention of £47 million of efficiency savings across the government plan. Some individuals may think that doesn't really go far enough. So what does the Chief Minister have to say to those voices? Thank you, sir.
Chief Minister.
I think it's important we keep it under review, because times change, the economy changes, the backdrop changes, the geopolitical situation is changing. We're living in a challenging world, sir, so we have to be prepared to revisit our spending on an annual basis, and I think that's why our process works well. So yes, we remain alive to that fact, sir, and I think the success of Jersey will depend on us listening in the future, listening to expert financial advice, sir, and it will also rely on the collective endeavours, not just of the government, but of this whole assembly, sir, to respond to that and make sure we do the right thing, sir, after careful and thorough debate. Thank you.
Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. Follow the answer from the Chief Minister to Deputy Wilson when been asked for the transparency. Government plan was cited. If we are looking through the government plan, reprioritization of previous growth funding, we have only one line saying revenue expenditure growth funding of totaling 3.1 million allocated to government 24-27 has been reprioritized according to the objectives. It would be helpful to have understanding how it was reprioritized. If I'm going down, I have cuts from the departments, but not per project. We don't have ministerial plans, understand? We don't have now departmental plans. Would the Chief Minister consider if further clarification in writing to the Assembly or publication of the department plans ahead of the budget debate will help with transparency to understand the numbers in the budget?
Well, we can certainly look at that, sir, and as I reiterate, the government remains open to providing at any time any further detail that any member may wish to see. We'd rather react and do it that way than providing reams and reams of additional information, the majority of which might not be required. So I repeat the offer, sir, to any member seeking further information to make contact with either the Treasury or the relevant minister or myself, and we will provide whatever granular detail is required.
Would the Minister consider publish departmental detailed plan ahead of the debate for the benefit of the public and all states members?
Yes, as I understand, some of the departmental plans I understand have or are about to be published, and the target is to make sure they are all published in time for the debate. Thank you.
Deputy Moore.
Thank you, sir. The Chief Minister has repeated a stock phrase this morning, curbing the growth. But words are sometimes easy, actions are a little harder. As I read to the Treasury Minister earlier, the Fiscal Policy Panel have found that compared to last year's government plan, this year's represents a 3% increase in expenditure of £103 million, which is net of a proposed saving programme that he talks about of £47 million. So could the Chief Minister provide the Assembly with the rationale and the facts around this curbing the growth programme, which is in effect an increase of 3% on expenditure?
As the Treasury Minister mentioned, sir, we've reduced growth in the overall budget, which was running at 9%, down to 5.3 or 5.4%, sir. The 3% figure that's alluded to, sir, it is factual, but that, sir, is a lot lower than it could have been. We had to work extremely diligently in the 10 workshops I mentioned before to prioritise, sir. And if you strip out the increase in the health budget that we've applied, and we were to strip out, sir, or to make allowance for the 9%, or 8 or 9%, I can't remember the figure, increase in the payroll in line with the very high RPI, sir. If you strip those figures out, the budget would have actually been very similar or reduced somewhat, sir. So what we've had to do to curb the growth, sir, is reprioritise. And if we hadn't have reprioritised, sir, it would have been a lot higher than it is now. But as I said before, this is a start in a process of bringing our public finances back into line, sir, and producing an annual report which is manageable and sustainable for the island, sir, and not carrying on as we have in the past. So the FPP also pointed out that we had ignored their advice over the last 2 or 3 years, sir, in relation to the strategic reserve, sir, and that's something which this budget starts to address.
Supplementary?
Thank you, sir. Sorry, I smile, sir, because, of course, the Chief Minister was the Deputy Chief Minister under the Le Fondre government, which had ignored the Fiscal Policy Panel's recommendations. So, sir, the question was about the rationale, and I ask again, because it wasn't answered in the previous answer, where is the rationale from the Chief Minister?
So in recent years, public spending has been growing at unsustainable rates, sir, and the budget we've lodged takes steps to curb this growth. It includes a greater focus on reprioritising spending to deliver this Assembly's priorities as outlined and supported in the Common Strategic Policy, as well as balancing the books and delivering sustainable public finances. I'm not sure what else I can say to that, sir. We can all learn from the past. I'm not going to pass blame to the previous government. I take full responsibility for all of my time in the States for what we got right and what we got wrong, even in the most challenging of times, sir. But like I say, getting this right, putting our finances back on the right track, is going to rely on the collective endeavours of this Assembly, sir, and I urge members to work together to achieve that.
Deputy Stevenson.
My question was asked earlier.
Deputy Joseph.
Sir, may I ask the Chief Minister, in advance of the budget, whether or not the government will be providing members with a detail of where the savings are going to be made in which basically break down the figure that's in the budget, which I can't remember what it is, but is he going to provide the detail of where the savings are going to be made?
Well, sir, I maintain that the detail, sir, is listed in the budget, and I repeat my offer to the Deputy and other members. If they seek further granular detail on a specific area, then ask us and we will provide that, sir. But we're not, as the Treasury Minister said, we're not planning to produce a raft of reports, many of which might prove unnecessary. So we prefer to direct our resources in a more productive way. But I just want to reiterate, sir, and the invitation, please, if there is any further information that's not in the budget, sir, which itself is a hefty, detailed document, then let us know. We'll provide the answers.
Supplementary?
I'm very happy to take the Chief Minister's, as other members I think are in this Assembly, completely unclear of what is the actual implications and what the savings are actually going to be and how they're going to be delivered. I'm willing to take up that. I think a number of other members are. There's a scrutiny panel looking at the budget, will the Chief Minister stand by and bring his Treasury Minister and other ministers with him to explain to members what we do not understand, which is what and how the savings are going to be delivered? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Chief Minister.
Of course, I'll try and help. Can I, in the first instance, refer the Deputy to page 106 of the budget, which sets out the expenditure cuts for every single department. Thank you.
Final supplementary, Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. I accept budget lines are in the public domain, but transparency is more than producing a set of figures. And I think what we're trying to ask the Chief Minister is if he could provide the context for the benefit of the public as well as members of the Council of Ministers and members of this Assembly. Can he advise what compromises were made as a result of the decision-making processes and how these have impacted upon the government's risk profile and the delivery intentions of his ministerial colleagues, and in which portfolios the impact of these savings will result in cuts to services and which ones?
Chief Minister.
I mean, the business of government at any time involves compromise and reprioritisation. So depending on the direction and the strategies and the policies of the existing government and their ministers. All I can say is the budget process and all the workshops and meetings we had during that I felt was productive and successful, where disagreements and juxtapositions were worked out in a democratic way, and we came to a good balanced position that the Council of Ministers could support unanimously, sir, when presenting the budget. Now, I'm not aware where there have been any compromises at all in our work, in our calculations, that provides any risk, sir, to islanders. On the contrary, in fact, we've redirected savings to frontline services, sir, including increases in the health budget, increases in education, sir. We're redirecting money to affordable homes. We've reduced GP fees. We're putting that money into areas that help islanders in these challenging times, sir. And that's the target and the aim of the budget, sir. I haven't identified any
point
risk,
of order,
but I'm
please.
not going to give way, sir, until I finish my answer with your
Well, it's a point of
kindly,
order,
sir.
so you have to down. What's the point of order?
So I have asked a question about what compromises, and I haven't had an answer
He
to
said
that
there's
question.
no compromises. He's given you that answer. Chief Minister, anything else you want to say?
No, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chief Minister. Question 8, Deputy Tadier will ask of the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister advise what assurances he has sought or received from Condor Ferries that existing bookings will be honoured or fully refunded in the eventuality that Condor are not awarded the Channel Islands passenger and freight operator contract and, as a result, cease to operate?
Minister.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for his question. As the Assembly knows, we are in a procurement process at present. However, should Condor's contractual relationship end next year, I fully expect the company and its stakeholders to have made adequate provision for continuity of services through to expiry of the operating agreement on 27th of March 2025. I continue to seek adequate assurance on this point from the Board of Condor and wrote to them recently on precisely this point. I do sincerely hope that Condor and its shareholders, Brittany Ferries and Columbia Threadneedle European Sustainable Infrastructure Fund, will provide this assurance to me.
Supplementary.
Could the Minister clarify when he wrote to them and how long he's been waiting for a response?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I wrote to them on the 23rd of September.
Question 9, Deputy Andrews will put to the Chief Minister. Deputy Andrews.
Thank you, sir. Will the Chief Minister advise what further plans, if any, he has to curb public sector growth beyond the current civil service grade 11 and above recruitment freeze?
Chief Minister.
So may Deputy Ferry take this question, sir, in his role as Vice Chair of the State's Employment?
Yes. Deputy Ferry.
Thank you, sir. The short answer is there are currently no plans to extend the recruitment freeze to further grades, sir.
Supplementary?
Yes, please, sir. There has been much attention about headcount and payroll expenditure reduction. However, what actions is the Chief Minister taking alongside the Council of Ministers to reduce non-payroll expenditure?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. As well as the £15 million payroll savings for grades of 11 and above, there is also looking at not relying on consultants, as has been the case in the past. And also, we currently have 1,000 vacancies that have been removed from the system. And this allows us to report more effectively on actual vacancies across departments and get a clearer picture of where our workforce is. So.
Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. As we heard, it was confirmed there is no freeze on recruitment for grades 11 and under. Would the Assistant Chief Minister clarify, would it include people who are retiring, taking redundancies, or being promoted from the front line from grade 11 and under to grade 11 and above? Would these positions will be advertised and recruited?
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for the question. So it applies across the board for grade 11 and above, but of course, frontline services and essential roles are excluded from that freeze. So yes, there will be some exclusions on that recruitment freeze, but broadly it is to make sure that we continue to make those payroll savings and that we are able to redeploy staff who find themselves wanting to move from one department to another, and allows us to make better use of the workforce, sir.
I think I'll try again and I'll try to be more clear. Grade 11 and under, not 11 and above. People retired, taking redundancies, moving up the grade. If all positions for grade 11 and under will be open for recruitment, or there is freeze as well there?
Yes, sir. I think I made that clear in my answer to the initial question that grade 11 and under are unaffected.
Deputy Braniff.
Thank you, sir. The position with regard to grade 11 and above is that there will be a recruitment freeze. What work has the government done to ensure that critically important projects, risks and so on are not handicapped by the fluke occurrence of somebody leaving who is occupying a role where currently critical work is being done on, for example, matters that might attract considerable risk to the government if they were to leave and not be replaced?
Deputy Ferry.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for the question. So, critical and frontline services are particularly excluded. So there are lots of safeguards in place to ensure that where work is critical, particularly to the work of the government over this next 2 years, that they are excluded from that freeze. So.
Parliamentary?
Yes, sir. Can I just confirm, does that mean they're excluded in that they would not be allowed to take redundancy or should they wish to go, or excluded in the sense that if they are allowed to go, but that there will be recruitment allowed to fill in behind them?
Deputy Ferry.
Thank you, sir. It is both of those things, but I would just like to reiterate that anyone can ask to be released at any stage, and that would include grade 11 above and below, and those will be considered on a case-by-case basis. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Andrews, final supplementary. Question 10, Deputy Doublé will put to the Minister for Social Security. Deputy Doublé.
Sir, I think Deputy Doublé is at her doctor's appointment. She mentioned earlier that...
She may be. Thank you very much. Question 11, Deputy Stevenson will put to the Minister for Health and Social Services. Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister advise the current waiting time for a laparoscopy, the number of patients on that waiting list, and how many of those are waiting for surgery to diagnose or treat endometriosis?
Minister.
Sir, taking those questions in the order in which they were asked, I can inform the Deputy that the current median waiting time for a routine referral for laparoscopy is 29 weeks. At the end of August, there were 376 people waiting for a laparoscopic procedure, and that's across general surgery and gynecology. Of these patients, 12 were recorded as waiting for surgery to diagnose or treat endometriosis. The median waiting time for these patients is 23.5 weeks, and all of these are defined as routine referrals. So given that these waiting times are longer than we might like in an ideal world, it might also be helpful to mention that the median waiting time for an urgent referral is actually 3.5 weeks.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. And I appreciate the information from the Minister. Endometriosis affects 1 in 10 women of reproductive age and often has a significant impact on their daily lives and physical and mental health. The UK's made it a priority as part of its women's health strategy. What is this government doing to help those islanders who are impacted by reducing those waiting lists and improving pathways?
Minister.
So this is a very difficult one. There are a number of different ailments that require priority. It's safe to say that anybody that requires an endoscopy could be deemed to be a priority. So I can't say that we're doing anything specific in this particular area other than to try and make the service more efficient. I would say again that for more urgent treatment it is 3.5 weeks, and if it's more urgent than that, then it would be even swifter, sir.
Deputy Reneth.
So, can the Minister therefore confirm that he doesn't expect those waiting lists to change substantially during the course of this remaining term of government?
Minister.
Sorry, sir, could the Deputy...
Yes,
Could the Minister confirm that he doesn't expect to see those waiting list delays change during the term of this government?
Minister.
Well, I'm certainly hoping they could be improved. I couldn't be specific as to the extent to which they might be improved, but we're certainly looking to improve them, sir.
Supplementary.
Could he therefore explain what measures he thinks that are being taken now or are planned that will improve those waiting?
Minister.
So these can only be improved by just general improvements in the efficiency of the service and the staff available, sir.
Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. Would Minister consider with urgent 3.5 weeks is fast enough when you live with incredible pain, and it might also symptoms for other diseases as well?
Minister.
I do recall saying in my first answer that in an ideal world this isn't a perfect scenario, but the Deputy used the term in incredible pain. Well, I don't think anybody at the hospital would leave somebody in incredible pain for 3.5 weeks. I did try and explain that if it's extremely urgent, then it would be virtually immediate. That's the way the priorities tend to work, sir.
I'm not sure if Minister would be aware, with incredible pain, there is no choice as to go to A&E, and maybe because of this incredible pain, a very, very strong and pain, people actually coming to A&E, and we have increased stress on A&E instead of addressing this in more urgent normal procedure outside of A&E.
As I said in my earlier response, sir, I think we can make that case for almost anybody suffering from any ailment. The truth of the matter is that the service is under quite a lot of pressure, and we're doing what we can to improve the overall performance of the department.
Deputy Joseph.
Thank you, sir. I noted that the Minister said the average week was 29 weeks. It's 31 in the UK. Members are aware now that we spend more per capita than most in the OECD on healthcare. What is his target for a waiting list which would be acceptable given the resources that we're putting, and how is he going to make efficiencies or other changes to make to reach that target?
So I think I have to correct the Deputy. I'm not certain that we do spend more per capita than the rest of the OECD. In fact, I think on a per capita basis we're slightly below the average. In terms of specifics for endoscopy, once again, these are drilling down into sort of individual areas, and I don't have a specific plan for endoscopy any more than I do for the dozens of other areas, other than the fact that we're trying to make the whole organisation more efficient in a number of ways, sir.
Supplementary.
I think it's a laparoscopy. I know what an endoscopy is because I've had one. Yes. So is he really saying, I understand the point that he makes, that let's take, I'm not asking him to question, to have a debate about the issue of government spending. All we know is we spend a lot on healthcare. And is he actually saying that he doesn't have what a good looks like target is for laparoscopies?
I'm very happy to say I don't have a target for that particular procedure any more than I have a particular target for anything else other than to improve all elements of the service to the greatest extent possible, sir.
Deputy Stevens, final supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Would the Minister commit to reviewing the pathways that are in place for the diagnosis, treatment and maintenance of endometriosis, and provide an update to members in due course, including perhaps looking at the options that are available for working with community settings to help in this area?
Minister.
So this one may be terribly popular, but I'm reluctant to accept to commit myself to any particular thing by virtue of a question that's asked in the Assembly. I'll make the point again that we're doing what we can, where we can, right across the piece. And as I say, it becomes difficult for the staff involved if every time somebody stands up and asks a question that I'll make a commitment in that particular area. So I'll just continue to say that we'll do our best in all areas, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Question 12, Deputy Gardner will put to the Chief Minister. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. Will the Chief Minister detail any tangible actions he is considering to deliver value for money and a reduction in public sector spending, and advise what reduction has implemented to date?
Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. The following tangible actions have been instigated to curb public expenditure, sir. Reprioritisation of growth budgets and reducing reliance on consultants and other third-party labour, and thus curbing spend on this expensive resource. Staff vacancy freeze alluded to in a previous question from August until March 2025, sir. And so we are not bringing in additional resources and only using existing resources wherever possible, sir. Encouraging departments to think hard about what activities they undertake and to align with agreed corporate priorities and key services, sir. In respect to future plans for savings and value for money, sir, these will be delivered under the following themes, sir. Review of the arm's length organisations and regulatory organisations, reducing the office footprint, reduction in role through removing management layers and extraneous activity, and reduction in consultancy, as I've already alluded to, sir. And as I said before, the reprioritisation in growth funding, sir, and the overall curbing of growth during the life of the budget we've presented.
Supplementary.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's interesting that the answer was using resources and curbing growth and reprioritization. We hear this a lot. Cutting costs, it's just about the numbers. And I would like to bring attention of the Chief Minister to the line in the budget which calls departmental net revenue expenditure. In December 23, we approved here for 2025 1,050 million, just above 50 million. For this year, for 2025, for the same departmental revenue expenditure, the Council of Ministers requesting 1,147,970. Would the Chief Minister explain increase by 100 million in departmental revenue expenditure?
I wonder, sir, if the deputy could direct me to the relevant page in the budget so I can look at the table she's referring to, sir.
It's page 42, just a minute, make sure that I do it correctly. 42 in the current budget and 40 at the previous budget. So, sorry, apology, 49 in this budget. $49, not 41.
I'm not sure I have the right one, sir. I'm looking at page 41 of the budget.
Sorry, it's my eyesight because it's small. It was a screenshot. Apologies, Chief Minister. If we are looking for page 41, it's departmental net revenue expenditure. We can see that in 2024 it was 1,057,000. And the same line asking for 1,047,000, and same line asking for 1,147,000 for this year.
I'm not sure I'm going to have time to go through it line by line and explain, so I wonder if the deputy would allow me to come back to her.
Well, I don't think we can...
No, I think that I'm happy to, Chief Minister, to look into this, and we do have questions without notice.
Yes, this might come back to haunt you later on this morning.
I expect it will, sir. Thank you.
Yes. Any other questions arising from this question? Deputy Joseph.
So the Chief Minister, this is all part of a sort of a picture of members wanting to know some detail. And the Chief Minister previously, in another question relating to savings, of which this is another one, which just indicates the fact, he pointed out that he was referring to page 106. Now, the problem is, and again, I think this is where the current question is going, is where's the detail? What does it mean? And is he going to actually come forward with ministers to explain what these numbers on pages, either 104, or 105, or the previous page, what do they actually mean? Because we don't understand them. And there has to be also a level of trust. I hope the Chief Minister would agree that there has to be a high level of trust in the government actually delivering them.
Well, sir, I refer the Deputy to my previous answer. The detail there, the large amount of detail there is in the budget, sir. The savings proposals, as outlined in the table on page 106. Now, I don't think any budget in the past, even when the Deputy was Treasury Minister for that period of time, published separately what would be hundreds and hundreds of pages of granular detail if you wanted a line by line breakdown of all of these figures, which is why, sir, I extend the invitation to members. If there is a specific area they'd like to see more detail on, provide us with the specifics and we'll provide the answer. But we're not going to spend time and resource producing hundreds or potentially thousands of pages of information that might not be necessary.
I do remind members under Standing Order 10.8, a question shall not raise an issue which in the current session has been decided by the State, fully answered, or to which an answer has been refused. And it's contrary to Standing Orders to ask a question that's already been answered in the session. Yes, supplementary?
Sir, your ruling just now indicates that we're not allowed to ask questions when it's been answered. But if the answer doesn't satisfy members in this democratic assembly because it's not clear, sure, we can press the ministers. Is that? I'm just trying to make sure that I'm not erring your wrath, sir, by answering the question.
If the question has been fully answered, you may not like the answer or agree with the answer, but if the question has been fully answered, in this case, by the Chief Minister saying, well, it's all on page 110, whatever it was, then when you've answered that, got that answer twice, there's no point in asking the same question again. Firstly, it's contrary to Standing Orders, but secondly, we do have 21 questions to get through, and ultimately other members will suffer because their questions simply won't be reached. So we need to bear the framework in which these questions are asked in mind.
So supplementary, sir. The Chief Minister was kind enough to refer to my tenure as Treasury Minister when we've delivered savings. He was part of that. Does he accept that the current explanations that are being given of the numbers that are put on in page 104 are insufficient for current members to have the confidence to vote in favour of them in the budget? And I maybe summarise my question, is the problem really the lack of this government not producing departmental plans, which means effectively we just don't know what departments are doing?
No, sir, because we are producing departmental plans and they will be available. Some of them are available now, sir, and this budget is running with the format the budgets have been running in for many years. We've tried to put in as much information as possible, sir. Of course, we're going through the scrutiny function at the moment, which is scrutinising these figures in greater detail, and we're engaging in that fully. So, and if there's any specific lines or specific areas that members would like more detail on, then please speak to the relevant minister, the Treasury Minister, or myself, sir, to articulate the information they want, and we will provide it.
So, can I raise a point of order very politely? I'm quite serious, sir. The Chief Minister just said he's going to produce departmental plans. In this Assembly, on the record, they previously said they're not. And I'm so sorry, sir, but it's like trying to get... Scrutiny is difficult. asking questions is difficult, but it's like trying to scrutinise a blancmange or an eel with Vaseline.
What is
it
the
keeps on
order,
moving.
a point of order?
Point of order. He said he's
seeking an
he
order from
previously
the chair.
said.
Please don't speak over me.
Sorry.
What order are you seeking? What ruling are you seeking under standing orders?
So the ruling I'm seeking, sir, is the Assembly has previously been told there's going to be no government plans issued by departments, no departmental plans. The Chief Minister has just said now that there are. Are we to expect that the words of the Chief Minister are the previous ones or the ones that he's just said?
That's not a point of order, Deputy.
Well,
So you know it isn't.
Well, I'm trying to find out the facts.
No, we're not having...
Sir.
Sorry?
I think I understand the question. And the Deputy, I think, is mixing up. We said we're not going to produce departmental business plans.
You've answered the question. We can't have a free-for-all, Chief Minister. Chief Minister, we
plans,
can't have
sir.
a free-for-all.
Okay.
Are there any other questions arising from this question? Final supplementary, Deputy Gardner.
Thank you. I will follow that later.
Question 13, Deputy Renouf will put to the Minister for Health and Social Services. Deputy Renouf.
Thank you, sir. Further to Jersey's Fiscal Policy Panel 2024 annual report, which concluded that the rate of growth in healthcare spending is not sustainable, will the Minister explain how he intends to ensure that healthcare spending is sustainable going forward?
Minister.
Sir, I think the conclusion of Jersey's Fiscal Policy Panel is generally accepted by all concerned, and as a consequence, I and my ministerial colleagues are looking at a range of measures to improve the situation. Firstly, and as I've alluded to earlier, we're in the process of redesigning the structure of the entire health service in Jersey in order to make it more efficient and, as a consequence, more cost-effective. Work is also underway to address ways of increasing the number of people who utilise private health insurance. In addition, we're looking to introduce a range of measures to focus on illness prevention. This will involve encouraging lifestyle changes from childhood, better patient monitoring using technology, more vaccinations and other various initiatives. This should help to reduce health costs in the long term, sir. This will require more money in the initial stages, and that's something that will have to be dealt with and addressed when the work is complete. However, these measures alone will probably not be sufficient to deal with the issue of above inflation increase in the cost of healthcare. So early in the new year, we intend to start work to consider various options to increase the amount of money available for healthcare funding, sir.
Supplementary.
Yes, I thank the Minister for the response. Given that, whichever way you look at it, this is going to involve some very difficult choices going forward for society, how does the Minister intend to engage the island in the debate about future healthcare spending?
Minister.
I accept what the Deputy says. This is going to be extremely difficult. The process, we've not really got the time or resource to start that work before the new year. When we do, we'll be defining ways, when we've got a clearer idea of what's going to be required, that's the point at which we'll start the whole process of consultation. We haven't worked out that consultation process yet, but we will be developing it as we go, sir.
Deputy Moore.
Thank you, sir. Along with the efficiency review that provided the Health Minister with clear recommendations for improving the efficiency of the health service, there is also the Financial Recovery Programme, which has set forward a clear plan to make savings, consistent savings year on year going forward. Will the Minister confirm that he is committed to delivering on the Financial Recovery Programme?
Minister.
Yes, so we're committed to doing that to the fullest extent possible. I think it's possibly proving a little bit more difficult than we anticipated because whilst it's going on, the cost of healthcare continues to rise above the cost of inflation. So it's a bit of a losing battle, sir. But I certainly accept that we'll be doing everything we can to reduce those costs.
Supplementary. Deputy Brenner, final supplementary.
Yes, sir. The FPP pointed out that health spending will soon reach 27% of government spending, which they commented puts us at the very top of the OECD league table and is a level more commonly seen in relatively high-tax Nordic countries. Is the Minister content to see Jersey travel in this direction? And if not, what other ideas does he have to solve the funding gap?
Minister.
I think the public of the island expect a decent health service, so the likelihood is that we're going to continue to go in this direction. It's going to be very difficult. We're a jurisdiction where we're trying to attract people to come and work here. We're trying to attract people to invest here and to bring staff to work here. as much as anything for the benefit of Pillar 2 taxation, and I think it's very important for us to have as close as we can to a world-class health service. So it's something I think we're going to have to pursue, regardless however painful that turns out to be, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Question 14, Deputy Moore will put to the Minister for Infrastructure. The Minister is absent. Is the Assistant Minister prepared to take the question? Thank you very much.
Yes, I understand the Assistant Minister taking this question. And a very humble question, thank you, after all of what's just gone by. Will the Minister provide an update on the 3 pedestrian crossings proposed on Rue de Leto, including the timeframe for approval and installation?
Thank you, sir. Rue de Leto is a parish road, but the Road Traffic Pedestrian Crossings Jersey Order 1982 requires that all pedestrian crossings, whether on parish roads or states-administered roads, are approved by the Minister for Infrastructure to ensure that crossings are constructed to the correct standards and have been thoroughly assessed through best practice safety assurance processes. The crossings on Rue de Leto have been proposed by the Parish of St Heliers Roads Committee. They have been technically assessed by road safety engineers, and the Minister will be signing the ministerial decision for their approval this week. The time frame for their construction will be a matter for the parish as a responsible by-roads authority.
Parliamentary.
Thank you for thank you, Minister, for that answer. So the underpass in the area was reopened in February this year, which has helped to alleviate the traffic levels on Rue de Leto. Why has it taken so long for the approval of the road crossings? How can future requests made by the Castle Quay Residents Association be more quickly expedited?
Thank you, sir. I don't think that the timetable for this is unduly long. The parish initially consulted with the department in December 2022. Officers from the infrastructure department undertook an initial site visit the following month in January 2023, where a number of technical issues were raised. Parish officers went back to their designers and subsequent revisions were made, and the application went to the department on the 13th of August this year. So the timetable has actually been quite fast in terms of the department. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Connettar. Question 15, Deputy Renouf will put to the Minister for the Environment. Deputy Renouf.
Further to written question 293/2024, will the Minister provide details on the progress being made in reforming the planning service, which is one of the government's 13 strategic priorities?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I'm fully committed to delivering real change in reforming planning services, and when I took on the role, it was made very clear to me the challenges of the planning process and how it was affecting our community and the environment. Putting those recommendations of the McKinnon Review into action has required my team to carry out a wide range of reforms, including cutting waiting times, improving customer service and boosting efficiency. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank every one of them from the top to the bottom, because their efforts have brought clear results. One of the most noticeable changes has been a 30% reduction in the number of pending applications. That's the applications within the department waiting determination, and that shows our growing speed and handling of applications. We've also raised the percentage of determinations made within our own targets from 59% in January to over 90% by the end of August. So the average time to validate new applications has also improved, falling from 10 weeks to just 2 weeks, a sharp 80% improvement. We've also launched the Planning Industry Partnership Board to work closely with stakeholders. We're publishing quarterly statistics to give a clear picture of our performance. But, sir, I remain focused on delivering all these reforms to make sure the planning service stays effective, efficient, and able to meet the needs of the island. Thank you.
Supplementary.
Yes, sir. The aim, I think, stated in the government's strategic priorities was to get Jersey building again. In answer to written question 287, it was recently revealed that whilst there were 615 approvals for planning for new homes in 2023, and so far this year there have been over about 644, that only 108 buildings this year have had commencement certificates issued against them. Is the Minister proposing to do anything to deal with the problem of planning permissions that are given but not actually built?
Minister.
Thank you, sir, and that's a very interesting question, one that I tried to grapple with when I was previously Minister for Planning back in 2014. It was myself who reduced the time that you could spend before you started building from 5 years to 3 years, and my intention in with that decision was to try to encourage people after they've been given an approval to get building. It's still a problem, and the changes I made back then haven't seemed to have made much of an improvement, I have to say, to the Deputy. People are still putting applications through, we're improving our performance, the approval rates are rising, but that in itself does not allow or doesn't mean that people will start building. The cost of building, the cost of materials, the cost of finding people to do the building is all starting, the cost of inflation, it's all having an effect. And we have a number of applications that have been improved, which I would desperately like to see getting built out. But it's difficult as a government to force people to build once they've got an application approved.
Question 16, Deputy Stevenson will put to the Minister for Infrastructure. Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister provide an update on the plans announced in June 2024 to ban the sale of disposable vapes in Jersey by April 2025, including the work, if any, undertaken since June, and advise when members might expect a proposition to be lodged for debate?
Thank you, sir. The drafting for this legislation is in the final stages of drafting, and we anticipate it will be ready for lodging within the next month. It has been overseen by a working group including officers from our policy, waste and recycling, trading standards, customs, health improvement and regulation teams. Consultation has also taken place with the relevant parties.
Thank you for that answer and the work that's underway, and we look forward to that coming forward. Can I just clarify, does that mean that we are still on target for April 2025, or is that date likely to change, given that previously I think we've been looking at a proposition for debate in October?
There is a chance that draft legislation will be lodged in time for the final sitting of the year. Otherwise, a debate will take place at the first sitting of the new session next year. The Assembly will certainly be given the opportunity to approve the legislation well before April 2025, but it will then be subject to the usual process for royal assent and ratification, which is outside of our control.
Thank you, Conrad. Question 17, Deputy Moore will put to the Minister for the Environment. Deputy Moore.
Thank you, sir. Further to the recently reported public comments in relation to turning derelict glasshouses into housing sites, in which the Minister is quoted as saying, in certain circumstances, a proposal could be made to allow some developments in exchange for major environmental gains for islanders. Will the Minister define what those certain circumstances would be?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I have published, as the Deputy knows, supplementary planning guidance in August of this year, which defines the circumstances where the exceptional development of derelict or redundant glasshouses might be permitted. Time doesn't permit me here to outline all the detail of this guidance, but I would refer the Deputy to it. But I will just finish by saying the term exceptional circumstance describes a situation in which there's a very special case for departing from a strong policy presumption. Exceptional circumstances are, by definition, unusual and often unique, and as such, it's not possible to list situations that may be regarded as being exceptional from a planning perspective.
Supplementary.
I thank the Minister for his answer. Would the Minister consider, therefore, that significant health and safety concerns would form part of those exceptional circumstances?
Minister.
I'm sure that significant health and safety concerns would form part of that, sir, but it would have to be one part of a number of other parts. And I just remind the Assembly, redevelopment is only going to be supported if the site is significantly blighting to the local environment, if the benefits of removing glass and subsequent landscape restoration not only substantially outweigh the impact of any new development, but also significantly enhance the landscape, where the development will have satisfactory access to foul and surface water disposal, and most importantly, where the proposed development represents the absolute minimum form of development that will fund the clearance of the glass and secure appropriate landscape restoration.
Deputy Joseph, was your light on?
Yes, sir, thank you. The question about derelict glass houses into housing sites has been effectively, I think, ducked and said that we don't want housing sites on them. May I ask the Minister, in the context of the question of derelict glass housing sites and the context of major environmental gains, whether he considers that the cannabis farms that are now on former derelict glasshouse sites have improved the environmental situation of Jersey and the agricultural industry? Are we not, in other words, are we getting more of them?
Minister.
So I'm pausing only to think of the three specific sites which I have in my mind where we have approved or we have had applications for cannabis production. One is still derelict and hasn't been developed. One was a continuation of existing use of a site that wasn't derelict, glasshouse, and one was a combination of the two, where some areas had become disused but not derelict, and it's been revamped. Certainly if a producer or anybody wants to come forward with a plan to grow cannabis in an existing glasshouse site, whether it's redundant, derelict, or still in use, or just there waiting to be used, that would be certainly considered as any other application. The point of the question here is the use of redundant and what the exceptional circumstances might be to take that glasshouse out of glasshouse production and turn it into something else.
Supplementary?
My understanding is, sir, that the cannabis industry is far from the Atlantis fantastic future growth scenario that it was, and that actually a number of, I understand it, that cannabis producers are...
Deputy Joseph, I do remind you that this question is about turning
derelict
glass houses
right.
into housing, not
yeah.
other
So,
uses.
so basically, there is a underlying point here. There is a application that is a current part derelict site in St Lawrence that can't expand for cannabis because it seems to be in trouble. Is he going to allow it potentially for housing? And under what circumstances would he allow housing? Because I think that's the underlying question that the deputy's asking is, can glass houses, under what circumstances will they allow housing? Because we've tried cannabis and that's not working. Will he go back to think back to the housing requirement, which is more important?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. And I'm not going to give any reference to any specific site or any potential application that may or may not be in the department at the moment. But what I would remind the deputy is that the island plan policy does allow, in exceptional circumstances, the redevelopment of derelict glasshouse of other uses, including residential, and I've highlighted a few of those there. I'm not going to repeat what I've already said, but what I would say to the deputy is we've not very long ago had a Bridging Island plan debate which housing sites were proposed and glasshouse sites were proposed. Some were accepted, some were rejected, but it's this assembly which sets the housing sites which will be developed in the next island plan, being a draft Bridging Island plan, whatever it may be. Housing sites which come forward outside of the island plan process have to meet very, very specific criteria, which is listed in the supplementary planning guidance and policies within the island plan.
Deputy Reynolds.
Thank you, sir. Would the Minister accept that in the slightly longer term, it might help move the debate forward if an audit were to be undertaken of all the glasshouse sites in the island to try and find out how they relate, for example, to existing services, how they relate to the transport network, what planning history they might have, what their suitability might be for alternative uses, and that this might mean that we could approach the debate in a slightly more finer-grained way.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. And I think I'm correct in saying that when I was Minister previously, I did exactly that. I can certainly recommend a document where a number of glasshouse sites were looked into, and the work that the Deputy has suggested was done. And I can see no reason why that work wouldn't be updated again before the next island plan debate, which will hopefully be in the next 3-4 years' time. I can only share the frustration of many other islanders, and I'm sure members in the Assembly, that building on a greenfield site seems an interesting proposition where we have redundant, derelict, dangerous glasshouse sites around the island which are serving no useful purpose. But there are policies within the island plan to deal with these sites, and unless those policies are changed, there is a process for turning these sites into housing, and that process has to be very carefully followed.
Supplementary? Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. Follow previous question. How many derelict, dangerous glasshouse sites do we have across the island currently that don't have future plans, and what square footage that they cover?
Minister.
I can't give the Deputy an answer to that, sir, but what I can say is that some are very, very large sites, and if you actually go out to the market to test for derelict, dangerous glasshouse sites, you will come back with some sites which are no bigger than this Assembly. So it's a very big range of sizes, but I will attempt to find out some information if it's available and get back to the Deputy on that point.
Supplementary.
Thank you. It would be helpful. And another question is, the Minister mentioned next island plan. We know that Bridging Island plan will finish in 2025, next year. If Minister can update what are the vision when we would debate next island plan?
I can't give a date to the Deputy, sir, but what I can say is there's a number of things which need to be done before we can have a next island plan debate. There's an extensive list. Some have been completed, some are in completion, some are yet to start. So there's a number of things which the draft Bridging Island Plan debate said before we have the next Island Plan debate we will need to do this work. Water strategy, for one, is one that I'm concentrating on, but there are a number of others. I don't envisage the next Island Plan debate. Certainly it's due in 2026, but I would think it would be at least 2 years, maybe even longer. And the reason if I might have the time, so to say, normally island plan debates are driven by housing demand, and it's clear that the housing sites that were passed in the draft Bridging Island Plan will fulfil our requirements further than 2026, which at the time we felt that would be the date we would need another island plan debate.
Deputy Tadier.
Thanks, sir. The Bridging Island Plan hasn't changed, but the Minister has changed, and so has the message. So whereas the emphasis used to be there is a strong presumption against change of use, it sounds like the current message is we might make an exception. Is this not simply encouragement of bad behaviour and reinforcing the message that if you leave your glasshouse sites derelict for long enough, you might be able to cash in with a change of use application?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Absolutely not is the answer to that question. Regardless of who the Minister might be, the policies in the Island Plan do not change. There may be a slight difference in the way that the terminology and ministers speak, but the presumption is in the green zone there will be a presumption against an approval of an application in the green zone. That's the policy. Doesn't matter which minister it is. That's the and I can't say more than that, sir, other than to emphasise there will have to be exceptional circumstances for a greenhouse site, derelict or dangerous or both, to be approved for housing. And if it was approved for housing, it would not be approved for the whole of the site, because the policy is very clear. Just enough development to cover the cost, the rest to be returned to the environment, to be turned to green, and for the benefit of the island.
So can I ask then, why is the conversation always about turning glasshouse sites into housing, when actually what the Minister could and should be doing, I would argue, I'd ask if he agrees, is actually saying these are agricultural and horticultural sites. Please restore them to glasshouse use. Otherwise, we will enforce planning on these sites to make sure that they are put into use, and if not, possibly even compulsorily purchase them off you.
Minister.
So, well, compulsory purchase is something that I certainly would not be in favour of, that would lead the States Assembly into all sorts of difficult decisions. But I take the Deputy's point on board. That's provided, how far does the States want to go down the way of enforcing people to use their greenhouses, enforcing people to use their gardens or their fields or their buildings or their shops, force people to keep shops open when they've decided to close them. There's a reason why we have so many greenhouse and glasshouse sites on the island that aren't being used anymore. It's because the business of greenhouse growing is not profitable anymore. Maybe that's something that myself and the Minister for Economic Development might discuss and come to the Assembly for another millions and millions of pounds with subsidies for green to maybe get greenhouse growing back on its feet. But the cost of production, the cost of the competition is just not viable. I think I'll leave it there, sir.
Final supplementary, Deputy Moore.
Thank you, sir. Following a consultation, there were a small number of amendments to the supplementary planning guidance when one makes a comparison against the draft supplementary planning guidance that was published by the previous minister. Could the minister commit, for transparency's sake, to providing to publishing the findings of the consultation process?
Minister.
I will, sir, but I'm a little bit surprised that they're not in the public domain at the moment. I think they probably would be, but I will look and see. I have to bear in mind, of course, sir, that in publishing anything, one would need to have the privacy of those people who responded. Have to think about that, and there will certainly, I would think, be some redactions that may be necessary. But I will look into that and see what we can do.
Thank you, Minister. If members are content, Deputy Dublé now wishes to ask question 10 of the Minister for Social Security. Deputy Dublé.
Thank you, sir. Further to the publication of R68/2024, the Family Friendly Post-Implementation Review Report and Ministerial Conclusions, will the Minister update the Assembly on the progress, if any, made to date in respect of the further actions identified in the Ministerial Conclusions to the survey as itemised in the report, and any other changes to policy or legislation in this area that have either been made or are planned?
Minister.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for her question. The main conclusion of the post-implementation review was to address issues of effective communication and training. As I said in my original ministerial response, the Jersey Advisory and Conciliatory Service has a vital role to play here. And upon asking for an update on what they have been doing, I know that they have organised and continue to organise free training sessions and promote awareness raising on social media platforms and also mainstream media of parental leave provisions in the employment law for the benefit of both employees and employers. I have no current plans to bring forward additional legislation relating to parental leave rights at this stage, because I understand that the legislation is currently working well.
Supplementary?
Thank you, sir. Many of the respondents to the consultation stated that they weren't able to access the full extent of the rights because they couldn't afford to do so. Can the Minister outline what plans she has to support those families who require more of the leave to be paid?
Minister.
I understand that for very many families, they wouldn't be able to make best use or the type of use that they may want to make out of the flexible working arrangements because of cost. Currently, mothers or birth mothers can access 6 weeks paid leave from their employer, and also parents can share the 32 weeks of parental benefit. In making any changes to that, I would need to consider employment legislation as a whole and how any changes that I would be making to employment legislation would indeed affect employers as well as employees. I did, as the Deputy will be aware, because I updated her scrutiny panel, ask for a cross-jurisdictional review of where we sat with employment legislation. I came to the conclusion that making changes in relation to parental rights wasn't the top priority, so I am at the moment focusing on other priority areas, including, of course, raising the minimum wage.
Deputy Kovacs.
Thank you, sir. In my work as chair of UNICEF Baby Friendly Initiative and Breastfeeding Guardian for Jersey, it has also come to light that although the legislation is in place, not too many expectant or new parents know their rights in this matter, and neither all employers know all their related responsibilities or have it established appropriately in practice. What exact measures does the Minister intend to take to equally raise awareness of all those and also assure compliance with the related legislation in the workplace?
Minister.
I thank Deputy Kovacs for raising awareness and for all of the work that she does in relation to raising awareness of breastfeeding. To answer her question, as I said in my main answer, following the post-implementation review, I did commit to working closely with JACS to ensure that employers and employees do get communications. I will actually also promise now today to also follow up with the maternity services as well with the Minister for Health to ensure that people, when they are expecting a baby, are fully cognizant and aware of what rights they are eligible for. I am very aware of the importance of breastfeeding and the need for flexible workplaces to encourage and promote breastfeeding and ensure that breastfeeding mothers do have the right provisions in place. So I will always have my door open to the Deputy to discuss ways in which we can further improve that.
Deputy Moore.
Thank you, sir. The family-friendly measures were brought in to improve outcomes such as the birth rate, the number of women engaged in employment, and also the reduction of the gender pay gap. So the Minister says in her answer that she is content that the legislation is working well. Could she therefore describe what she believes are the causes of our current severely declining birth rate?
Minister.
I'm afraid the causes of the severely declining birth rate isn't something that is part of my portfolio or something that I feel qualified to comment on at this particular point in time. But perhaps the Deputy would like to raise the question with myself and perhaps other relevant ministers at a later date.
Final supplementary. Deputy Dibbley. Do a final question?
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister give some more detail on something that she mentioned at the same hearing that the panel initially raised this, where she mentioned she was looking at the income support rules for families who perhaps own their own home and may be able to benefit from income support to access this leave for a longer period of time?
Minister.
So income support is, of course, a different benefit to the parental benefit. Perhaps what I can update the Deputy on is I have asked officers to look at eligibility with regard to parental benefit, specifically in relation to contributions records and the relevant quarter. I haven't yet started or commenced any work in relation to income support and people on mortgages, although I do continue to look in very much detail at our current income support legislation.
Thank you, Minister. Question 18, Deputy Joseph will put to the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development. Deputy Joseph.
Thank you, sir. With regards to concerns expressed by the Fiscal Policy Panel about the island's current and rising rate of inflation, will the Minister advise what actions and policy options, if any, are being considered to address concerns raised by the subsequent significant increase in the cost of living and related hardship? And I should say that, so I asked either Treasury Minister or Economic Development Minister to step forward to answer the question.
Thank you. It was, sir, but there's no Mum.
Only briefly, Minister.
And I thank the Deputy for his question. And as the Deputy will appreciate, I've no doubt, Jersey's ability to manage inflation directly is limited, as we do not have our own monetary policy. The government, however, is committed to use those available policy levers where it can to manage inflation. And to this end, the Common Strategic Policy sets out that we will keep fees, duties and charges as low as possible to avoid creating an inflationary effect. And members will have seen that in the budget, where the duty rises, etc., are extremely low. As far as helping those cope with rises in the cost of living, matters such as the minimum wage rise are part of that, as are those attempts to mitigate any inflationary matters around that.
Supplementary, Deputy Joseph.
Thank you, Ma'am. Thank you. I really appreciate the Minister absolutely differentiating from imported inflation versus domestic inflation. And really, that's where I think the Minister can, he said he doesn't have policy options. He does have some policy options, I think, or the government does. Policy options are relating to supply side, increasing productivity, reducing local price pressures, increasing sectors of capacity such as housing, utility regulation, competition. Can he give me some indication of his enthusiasm or otherwise to deal with what I think he would recognise is a very potentially serious issue? That the issue is domestic inflation, not imported inflation. Ma'am.
I thank the Deputy for outlining his particular concerns, and they are concerns that I have myself. I think whilst it is possible to distinguish between domestic and imported inflation, there is a reality, which is that the vast majority of inflation in our island is imported if we look outside of the housing market aspect of it. So if you remove the housing market side, then most of the rest is imported. To that end, of course, we do have the Jersey Competition Regulatory Authority, and certainly in the year ahead, sir, we'll be bringing forward changes to the competition law to help the authority address matters that the Deputy has talked of. And with regard specifically to supply side, that is exactly one of the reasons why we have gone to a contract for ferry services in this way and have undertaken a thorough tender process, because we understand as well that even just the cost of shipping to the island add inflation to the prices that we pay. Developing closer economic ties with Normandy and Brittany, as many members will know, has been something that I've been focusing very closely on. And one of the key drivers of this is to create a southern supply chain that can provide a greater choice in products and prices for islanders, as well as increase the length of time that many goods spend on the shelves. Because at the moment, again, one of the places that islanders pay cost is because there is a decreased amount of time on the shelf life, because goods, fresh goods, and time-limited goods will pass from Europe all the way up into the UK and then come all the way back down again to the islands, thus losing shelf time. That increases cost. From the perspective of the minimum wage, I have seen this as an opportunity, this increase in the minimum wage, as an opportunity to really push the importance of businesses in Jersey increasing productivity and providing an opportunity through the mitigation measures that that I will be unveiling in the coming weeks, to really provide businesses with the opportunity to invest in themselves in many different ways to increase their own productivity. A lot of that will be in technology investment, which therefore will, the aim is to reduce the need for any individual business to rely on employment to the extent that they do at the moment. There are other measures, including such as far as the domestic side is concerned and the demand side is concerned, such as providing preschool meals for primary school children, which in themselves will reduce the cost of living for households in the island. But there's no doubt that I agree with the Deputy that focusing on the supply side is absolutely vital, and that is why I am so focused on developing a southern supply route, because at the moment this island imports inflation from the United Kingdom and has absolutely no control or alternative means of changing that in any way. By creating a southern supply route, we will help provide that choice and mitigate that inflation that we import from the UK. So.
Thank you. Yes. Deputy Andrews.
Thank you, sir. What impact, if any, will increasing the personal income tax thresholds have in the forthcoming budget? And what impact will that have on inflation in our domestic economy?
Minister.
Sir, increasing tax thresholds, which is something that the previous government also did, enables islanders to have greater purchasing power. In itself, that will have, I believe, likely, and I haven't checked the figures, so this is my own personal opinion, a very marginal inflationary impact. But it is, I believe, marginal. And the ability for islanders to have more money in their pockets, I think at the moment, after years of suffering through higher prices, I think is a really important one. Because it's also important to note, sir, that RPI is beginning to slow down. The rate of growth in the rate of inflation is slowing down, and that is a very important point to note.
Final supplementary, Deputy Oathers?
Sir, I am, I guess, somewhat disappointed by the Minister's answer. I draw his attention to a 2006 report on barriers to entry for France. I'll send it to him if he hasn't got it. I don't think, I think he's saying that basically opening up southern routes in France is a solution to inflation. My question really was, and I understand that there is not an explicit breakdown in the domestic versus non-domestic inflation in the FPP's recommendation. However, they are clear that there is domestic inflation arising. And I would welcome perhaps the opportunity of discussing it with the Minister and ministerial colleagues about the importance of it, because there's a lot of experience from the past that has been used to depress domestic inflation, and the FPP is warning this Assembly and him and other ministers that there is a rising inflation which is going to erode the pound in people's pockets. And it does appear to me, and I don't know whether he agrees, that there is not enough emphasis given on that eroding of the pound in people's pockets domestically arising.
Minister. Sir, I don't wish to disappoint the Deputy. That would be the last thing I wish to do today, sir. In so much I agree, and I apologise for not being expressive enough to have shown that previously. There is no question in my mind that islanders have experienced a significant increase in the rate of inflation. The latest inflation statistics, which are a couple of months old now, and I do wish we had them more often, do show and do point to the possibility that underlying inflation is becoming a feature of the economy, and that does concern me a large amount. It is the reasons for that are wide and varied. There is imported inflation through the UK. There is also, and when we talk about government, there are ways of making life so much easier for islanders and for businesses in this island just by becoming a much more user-friendly government. By, for instance, last Assembly I was asked about the procurement processes. By ensuring that businesses do not spend very long lengths of time on things like a procurement process or a planning process, etc., we reduce the cost of inflation, or we reduce the cost of living in this island in another way. It's the same with islanders. It's every time that as islanders we are forced to divert our efforts into dealing with the bureaucracy or dealing with delays in delivery of services, that increases the cost of living in this island. These are the things which are very difficult for us to deal with directly, but are really important to understand. I do believe it's important to deal with the supply side. Brexit has forced a wedge between us and the European market. That is something which is not in the interests of this island, in my opinion, at all. And I am doing everything I can to try to make sure that we can reconnect with the European market, which is absolutely, I think, a vital route for alternative goods to come to this island at alternative prices. I cannot say whether they'll all be cheaper. Of course I can't. But at the moment, we have a supply chain which is entirely lacking resilience because it is one supply chain. There is no other route to this island. And it is a supply chain which is entirely prone to the whims of whichever government is in the United Kingdom and the way their policy choices. Therefore, I believe it is absolutely vital that we empower this island to have a greater choice of goods and services that islands can then buy and are able to make choices. Price will be one of those choices, as well as quality. So.
Thank you, Minister. That brings the period for oral questions on notice to an end. So, under Standing Order 63.9, questions 19, 20, 21 must be answered in writing by the relevant minister as soon as possible by response to the greffier for distribution. We now move to questions to ministers without notice, and the first period of questions is for the Minister for Children and Families. The first question is from Deputy Miles and then Deputy Iyer. Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. Looking after children with additional needs can be very difficult. Is the Minister aware that there are current difficulties in providing adequate short break services to families for children with additional needs?
Minister.
Thank you. I am aware that there have been some issues with being able to provide all the services that are required. We have a relatively small number of people looking after that service, and their time is obviously allocated by need. But I am more than happy to look into the matter further. Thank you.
Supplementary.
I thank the Minister for that answer. The Minister has acknowledged that there's limited capacity across the service. What is he doing to increase that capacity to ensure respite for exhausted families?
Minister.
Immediately, I am aware that, as I said, I am aware there's a limited number of people. To immediately change that is difficult. So as part of this, I will consult with the Director of Children's Service to see what we can do to extend the current number of people who are actually part of that service. Thank you.
Deputy Iyer.
Thank you, sir. Since the retrospective change of use for One Castle View was rejected by the Planning Committee in March and an appeal of that decision was dismissed earlier this month, what are the Minister's next steps for finding suitable accommodation to replace this dwelling with an alternative Class J residential home? Thank you, sir.
Minister.
Thank you for that question. I was, of course, disappointed that the appeal was rejected. We must always consider the needs of the child and the implications of the UNCRC on the rights of the child to have a home. One of the immediate remedies would be, of course, to continue the appeal by a judicial review, but that's not a course of action that I would wish to take. I've taken legal advice on the matter, and I have to say that that concurs with my own view that, of course, what took place was entirely consistent with the planning law. So I have a meeting arranged for later this week in which we will discuss how we take the matter forward. The options are, of course, that we could put in a further planning application or a new planning application, taking into regard that the reasons for that the appeal was dismissed were purely on with regard to parking matters. Thank you.
Supplementary.
Yes, thank you, sir. Will the Minister learn lessons from this event when seeking to open future children's homes? Thank you, sir.
Minister.
Absolutely, because the history of this application is that initially officers were advised that they didn't require planning permission to change a residential home to a registered children's home. And of course that was incorrect, and it was some months later that a retrospective application was lodged. The outcome of that and the subsequent led to the appeal. In future, of course, we would ensure that before attempting to move a child into a home, that home has the appropriate planning approval. I have some concerns with the existing planning law that perhaps it shouldn't differentiate between a child in care and a child who's not in care. For instance, if the current property was let to the parents of a child, they could move into that without any question and no planning approval would be required. If the same child is in the care of the minister, it becomes a children's home and therefore it requires planning permission, and I feel that that is not fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Honourable St Martin.
Thank you, sir. I've noted that several fostering campaigns have taken place this year. Could the Minister let us know whether these have been successful, and if so, does the service now have sufficient foster families to meet its needs?
Thank you very much. That's a very interesting question, in the fact that we have had a very successful campaign. If I run through that, we've had, during part of that time, we've had 59 fostering inquiries, from which 34 families asked for an initial visit from the service. Now, it's interesting that after that, it drops to 5 families that actually took part in training. So there is a tremendous effort in those fostering campaigns. It quickly reduces to around 10% of the people actually going forward to take up those positions. In the UK, we are doing substantially better than the UK, where initial responses only result in 6% of applications. So 94% of the people who make an initial inquiry drop out. The position now is that we actually have the number of fostering families has risen from 36 to 39. However, whilst that's very positive, I have to say there is a but, and the but is that we have to be able to manage, we have to be able to match the children who require placement with the families, and many families, of course, looked forward to having a younger child, and it is our sort of adolescent teenage children where we really have a gap. So we have a large number of foster families, but not necessarily all of them wish to have a teenager, and that's something that we're still working on. So yes, we've had some very positive results, but for the older children, we have more work to do in our campaign, and the campaign for families who will specialise in teenage children will be repeated again before the end of the year.
Supplementary?
Yes, thank you, sir. So how does the service support the teenagers or support the foster families? Sort of two-edged.
Yes, Minister.
I would say that support of the families has improved, and that's been recognised by the meetings we have with the Jersey Fostering Association, and in fact those meetings are part of the support. I have quarterly meetings with the association. I also encourage, if necessary, for foster families to contact me directly. They may not wish to have the matters raised in a meeting, and so I am equally happy that they contact me directly. We now have 7 fostering social workers, with 2 more to be recruited. We have a full number of managers, that's 3 managers, and we have a new head of service. And between them, they have very much improved the service and the support for the families. Nothing is perfect, though. There are always lessons to be learnt. Early in the year, we had problems with payments, with the support of the staff at Liberty House. That was rectified with their colleagues in the payments department. I think that falls into Treasury. But the other thing that we are working on is something that's used in the UK, and that is called Mockingbird, where groups of foster carers support each other in a cluster. They're supported by the social worker, and this would also bring in support from CAMS and other parts of children's services. Thank you.
Yes, Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. In an answer to a written question from myself, the Minister has stated that the further extension of duty-bearing responsibilities with regards to the Children Convention Rights Law will not now be extended to public authorities until the end of this political term. Can the Minister explain why this timetable has been extended from the end of this year, please?
Minister.
I think that's purely due to the demands on the law officers. We have many other pieces of legislation which need to be lodged or brought forward in this term. And I don't think that's the only bit of legislation which may be delayed slightly. I'm still very committed to doing that. And it is purely, I think, due to resources. Thank you.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Can the Minister give a more precise date that he envisages bringing this Commencement Act to the Assembly, please?
Minister.
I'm sorry, I can't do that at this point, but clearly I will try to keep the Deputy up to speed with our progress if she wishes to contact me. Thank you.
Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. Could the Minister confirm what reductions in public sector growth are impacting on his portfolio and how he intends to mitigate any risks arising from the lack of growth in children's services?
Minister.
Thank you for that question. It is a challenge, as with other departments. There was a 20% cut in the previous growth, and that inevitably leaves us looking for savings to make up for services that we've funded in the past. What I can't promise is you can't promise that it won't lead to some services not being available. And I sincerely hope that that's not the case, but it's still something that I'm working on. Thank you.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. The Minister has indicated that there may be some need for further growth or even cuts in his services to meet the demands of children and families, as we've just heard in relation to fostering and, more notably, young people's mental health services. Given the concerns raised by the Fiscal Policy Panel in relation to the island's medium to longer term finances, what consideration is being given to how the approach to financial prudence would impact upon children's services over the medium to longer term if growth is constrained?
Minister.
I think we are looking for ways to use our resources more efficiently. I think that's something that is relatively early, with the new Director of Children's Services having some initial plans. I would consider the running of the children's homes one area where we can be more efficient in the use of our funds and not reduce the service. For instance, there are government properties that we could use, and in fact are doing. We are working with partners such as Andium looking at how they could build and lease us properties, which would be a cheaper alternative to us actually purchasing those properties and having the ongoing cost. So it's early days, but what I would not, as I've said before, the last thing I want to see is any reduction in our services. So we have to be more efficient.
Mr. Reneth.
Thank you, sir. The common strategic priorities say that the government will further build on the recommendation. Sorry, the government, the CSP says that the government will further build on the recommendations from the Independent Jersey Care Inquiry 2017 by delivering on our corporate parenting duties as set out in the Children and Young People Jersey Law 2022. Can the Minister detail what he's doing to deliver this?
Minister.
Of course, we are all corporate parents in this Assembly, and those duties will soon be, as we've actually all alluded, that those duties will also be taken up by a number of the parishes, arm's length bodies, and various other organisations. So it's an ongoing process, but what I would like to see actually is more training in corporate parenting. I'm not sure that the role of the corporate parent is necessarily considered in all cases when decisions are being made. I see that from time to time, that I think when that decision was made, did anyone really consider the rights of the child? So I think it's an ongoing process. It's always at the being corporate parenting is always at the forefront of my mind.
Minister, that brings the period to an end. I must remind ministers of their obligation to answer questions concisely, if at all possible, with an overall limit of 90 seconds in mind. I'll move to the Minister for Children and Lifelong Learning, and the first question is from Deputy Miles. Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. Less than half of applications for postgraduate bursaries are successful. Indeed, in 2024-2025, only one full bursary has been awarded. Can the Minister offer any explanation for such a low success rate?
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the question. There is a priority around postgraduate qualifications in terms of the funding. I'm surprised that only one application was successful, and I will go and look whether that is an accurate figure, because I think there were some other issues around that. There is a process for postgraduate qualifications that we don't fund already. There are some that are funded if they lead to a professional qualification and if they're identified as needs for the island. I think it's very important that that prioritisation happens. It would be lovely to fund every single postgraduate course that our students want to do. But to do that, sir, we have to have a fairer tax system, something I'm a proponent of. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Will the Minister undertake to revise the application process to better support students who are not able to access this important source and indeed the only form of government funding for postgraduate study?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. So there is a process. Changing the process to make it more open, to make it more usable. If there's money left over, then it should be spent. I'd accept that. But the process itself is a process that has been consistent through the years, and it does depend a great deal on what the postgraduate qualification is for. There are also other methods of funding via, I know some students are creative in the UK, for example, with master's degrees for particular areas that they get funded. But yes, we can look at it again, but as I say, it is a pot of money that's limited, and there will always be a limitation as to what can be funded in terms of postgraduate qualifications. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Reneth.
Yes, sir. Does the Minister consider that it's time to look again at whether children at GCSEs should be required to take at least one foreign language?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I thank the Deputy for the question. If we, as an Assembly, determine what is in the curriculum, we have to recognise what will be taken out of the curriculum. And so in doing that, we all act as head teachers. I would rather, sir, leave that to the professionals who know their students. Languages are an option in every single school and can be chosen. If you make a language compulsory, it may not fit the wishes of some students in particular, and you will have to remove something else from the curriculum. Now, what will that be, sir? Will that be something like the DEC course, which has been incredibly successful in our schools and is leading to development in the construction industry, for example? There is a limited curriculum, sir, and we have to think about what is best for our students in the long term. And so yes, we can look at that again, but I think that schools would want to have control over their curriculum and tailor it to the needs of their students.
Supplementary?
Yes, so I'm not sure that what I'm suggesting would take anything out of the curriculum. What it would do is, in the same way that we make a certain amount of maths and English compulsory because we recognise that they are fundamental to people's education, that we would do the same with foreign languages. We would say that it is fundamental to a child's education that they should speak some language. And I wonder whether the Minister couldn't look at it from that point of view and say whether he doesn't think from this island's point of view that it would be better to have students all studying a foreign language at GCSE.
Thank you, sir. So I must point out a reality to the Deputy. If you make a language compulsory, it takes up curriculum time. There is no empty curriculum time. So if you make that compulsory for all students, some students who do not want to do a language at GCSE now will have to do it and therefore not do something else. Either that or you extend the school day, or you do the language after school or before school. There is a limited time, and that curriculum is absolutely rammed because of the changes that have happened over the last few years. So I'm afraid it is unrealistic to say you can just simply introduce a compulsory language where having no effect elsewhere on the curriculum. And that is a choice that will have to be made.
Deputy Ayer.
Thank you, sir. The A-level exam results in Jersey had a pass rate of 96% compared to 97% in England, and those with an A and A-star grade were 25% in Jersey compared to 27% in the whole of England. Does the Minister believe that this is a cause for concern? Thank you, sir.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Two things. First of all, the final A-level results are not published yet because there are still remarks, etc. So it takes some weeks for exam boards to finally publish final results. So we have to take those results with a pinch of salt, and they may change. Second thing is a very, very important point for us. And this would also be the point if our results were about 5% above the UK. We have a very small data set. We are comparing a small data set of our A-level results with a very large data set of A-level results in the UK. And you have to be extremely careful. So to be within 2% above or below a large data set like that is probably statistically significant to say they are virtually the same. And so it's really difficult to compare in that way. It also, sir, depends on what A-levels were taken. If some are more popular than other, that may skew results one way or the other. It's a very complex piece of data. So I would be very careful of making broad statements from those pieces of data.
Supplementary?
Yes, thank you, sir. Does the Minister believe that our A-level students were affected by the teachers' strikes? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Strikes will, of course, affect education, which is why I'm very pleased that they're not there anymore and we solved them within a couple of days.
Deputy Joseph.
So, whereas referring back to a question that Deputy Renouf asked, whereas the legal language of Jersey is English and French, there was a proposal before the Assembly for a bilingual school, and the Minister has kindly written an answered a written question on the teaching of French. Is the Minister satisfied that, given what I've said previously, that the standard of French in our schools is acceptable?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Acceptable is a good word, isn't it? Acceptable is very difficult to define because it's something that can be acceptable to one and not to the other. Our language teaching in schools, particularly in primaries, has developed and is the only curriculum time for a language that is emphasised. No other language is compulsory at that time. In secondary schools, it is compulsory into Key Stage 3, and then it is an option of French and other languages throughout our secondary schools. Indeed, some schools have moved away from the compulsory language because of the need to provide a more broad and balanced curriculum for the needs of the young people and our economy into the future. I think there's a difference, sir, between just GCSE languages and the use of a language. I really do not believe that the resources that we have to go to a bilingual school, and it will be 3 or 2 bilingual schools, is the most effective way to engage in that language acquisition, whatever it may be, and whatever acceptable is defined as.
Supplementary?
My question was pretty open, sir, and maybe the word used acceptable, but I'm going to restate it. Is the Minister satisfied that given our cultural identity and the legal second language of Jersey, I could answer this question in French under the law because it's our second legal language. Does he think that the level of French that's outlined in his written answer is good for Jersey, good for the island, based upon other ministers' priority of links to France, our proximity to France? Is he happy with it? And does we think we need to do something about it?
Thank you, sir. So there is always room for improvement in any delivery of a curriculum, but one has to also be realistic about what is being delivered and the demands of everything else that is in our curriculum. We also have huge demands for multi-language learners. I think it's 16% of our population are speakers of Portuguese. If there was to be a bilingual school, perhaps the most sensible school would be Portuguese. Now, if you're talking about our cultural heritage, it's wider than just children speaking French in schools. And there is a curriculum that we deliver. Am I happy with the level of French? Sir, would it be nice for every single child to speak fluent French? Well, I suppose so, if that's the way you see our cultural heritage. But what's going to go from the curriculum? There's criticism, sir, of literacy, of numeracy, of the social skills of our children, unfounded, I would say, because of the work that's going on all of the time. And it seems to me that schools have become the scapegoat, sir, for inadequacy in political decisions that have been made over many, many years. And I really find that's a real shame.
Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. Can the Minister advise when he is going to publish the play strategy and indeed act on the recommendations within it?
Minister.
So, no, I can't, but I will get an answer to the Deputy as soon as I can.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir. Can the Minister advise what level of priority he's given to this work? And given that the play strategy was complete, can he commit to publishing it before the end of this year, please?
So I'm not going to make any commitments on the hoof until I look at the detail of that play strategy. Obviously, we have priorities around the CSP, around nurseries, around school meals, and the development of lifelong learning, which are really important to us. Play strategy is, of course, important. Unfortunately, sir, what I'm not going to do is make everything a priority, which seems to have been a sort of a cultural habit previously. So we have to look at it carefully. But I'm quite happy to engage with the Deputy and to provide as much reassurance as I can that I see it as an importance as well, sir.
Deputy Tadeo.
Will the Minister comment on the Memorandum of Understanding that's been signed between Jersey and Wren Business School earlier this year, whether he thinks that's a positive development for education as an option for students in Jersey?
Minister.
Yes, it is a positive development.
So will the Minister take to emphasise the availability of courses being provided by Wren Business School, which are also available in English as an alternative for students who may not wish to go to the United Kingdom for their business courses?
Yes, sir, I'm quite happy to promote that, and it's part of I think Wren Business School were actually at the Careers Fair and the Skills Show, so that does happen, and it's interesting those courses are available in English, so thank you.
Deputy Moore.
Thank you, sir. Without funding for an apprenticeship scheme, what plan does the Minister have to encourage vocational skills and in-work training?
Thank you, sir. I simply do not agree with the Deputy when she says there's not funding for an apprenticeship scheme. There are currently 390 current apprenticeships happening as we speak, and there are 28 higher apprentices happening at Highlands College. And so I'm a bit tired of people talking down our apprenticeships and the way that they're working, because there is some fantastic work going on there, providing for the needs of the island in a whole range of apprenticeships, from greenkeeping to bricklaying to playwork to early years to hairdressing to beauty to childcare, civil engineering, childhood studies, and the list goes on. I think it's about time we gave credit to our Highlands provider for the work that they're doing. So there is funding, there will be continued funding, but it will be targeted, and we will get Skills Jersey working with the college to do the right thing at the right time for the right reasons.
Supplementary?
Yes, sir. I think the Minister missed the in-work training part of my question, and what he will do to assist those businesses who would like to have apprentices in working with them but cannot afford to do so.
Well, so thank you. First of all, if there are any businesses who feel they cannot afford to have an apprentice, I urge them strongly to contact Skills Jersey, because there are schemes available and there is an encouragement to take on these apprenticeships. So the cost of the apprenticeship is very, very low, and I will oppose any increase to that cost, because I don't think that's the right thing to do at this time for our economy. But those apprenticeships are available. One of the issues is that businesses are facing challenging times. I recognise that, but we have to come up with some sort of cooperative approach whereby we can train for the future. Because the other option then is to simply import and constantly have a process of recruitment, which is in the long term is more expensive than taking an apprentice and training them ourselves. So I think there are ways we can do that. And so one of the things, in fact, I'll leave it there because there might be some more questions there.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. As a member of the Council of Ministers, is the Minister frustrated by agreeing to a lack of financial growth in education services? And what compromises did he make in agreeing to the budget set out by the government?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Of course I'm frustrated that the education budget is not doubled, sir, because it's the most important remit in the entire Council of Ministers. But I may be having a slight bias in my opinion there. There is growth for education. One of the problems we've had in the past, sir, is there's been, in past governments, growth has been defined, which actually all it did was reset the balance. When £6 million of growth was given to schools, all it did was pay off their debts. And the narrative around growth was wrong. The growth that we have now is targeted towards specific areas of early years education, of enabling children to have a hot meal inside them at lunchtimes, which is a good thing, and to develop a lifelong learning processes which will be constructive and useful for this island. So yes, there could always be more money, but we've inherited the government plan from last year. I've inherited the budget for this year. Let's see what we can do with that.
Thank you, Minister. That brings that period of questions to an end. And I'll move to the third period of questions to the Chief Minister. And the first question is from Deputy Breniff. Deputy Breniff.
Thank you, sir. The Chief Minister leads a government that will see health spending rise above any other OECD country as a proportion of expenditure and above the OECD average as a percentage of national income. Does this worry him? And if so, what does he propose to do about it?
It doesn't worry me, sir, but we are, and the Health Minister is alive, as is the Council of Ministers, to the increasing cost of healthcare brought on by a number of factors. The high inflation, rising costs of medication, staff shortages leading to the engagement of agency staff, which are cost a lot more, add to the cost of the health service. We have provided in the budget, asked for extra money to go to health, which I hope the Assembly supports, sir. But we will be watching closely with the Health Minister that the budget's moving forward to make sure they are appropriate, sir. Continue to deliver the best possible health for islanders that we can. Of course, the investment in the new hospital, which we hope will come online in time in 2028, will help. We hope to alleviate that, sir.
Supplementary?
Yes, sir. At the briefing that the Fiscal Policy Panel gave, they pointed out that the levels of health expenditure in Jersey were more appropriate for a high-tax Scandinavian jurisdiction, Nordic jurisdiction. Given that this is the level we seem to be heading at, is the Minister content to see us move in that direction of higher taxes to pay for our health service?
Chief Minister.
No, so I wouldn't support higher taxes to pay for the health service, if that was the question.
Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. Can the Chief Minister confirm that policy resources have now been found to prioritise a full modernisation of Jersey's outdated termination of pregnancy law during 2025?
Chief Minister.
Yes, sir, I believe they have, I'm pleased to say, and the Health Minister did confirm that at the beginning of last week.
Supplementary.
Thank you. And will that resource be a temporary policy resource or permission for the recruitment of a permanent policy officer?
Chief Minister.
I simply don't know the answer to that question, but I can find out and come back to the Deputy.
Thank you. Deputy Renouf.
I've already asked mine.
Well, you've got another one. Do you want another one or not? All right. Deputy Moore.
Thank you, sir. There have been a number of senior departures from government recently. Does the Chief Minister is the Chief Minister aware of any more departures on the way?
Chief Minister.
Well, sir, I am aware that there will be more departures, there will be more redundancies in line with the strategy that this government have set out. I don't know who they will be or where they may be, so that's a role that the Chief Executive is leading on, so as he restructures the senior management of the public sector.
Supplementary.
Yes, I'm glad the Chief Minister raises the topic of restructuring. Usually that begins at the top. Does the Chief Minister have a plan yet for restructuring the top tier of government?
Chief Minister.
Well, that's included in the current strategy, sir, in relation to the work the Chief Executive is leading on to examine and refine the senior management structures. There's no a particular plan or strategy, additional strategy, other than that we've outlined. And I have no other strategy, sir, other than to support our Chief Executive in his duty that we've asked him to deliver savings on the payroll.
Deputy Joseph.
Thank you, sir. My question is about the housing market. In all questions, I took from the Housing Minister that he is not concerned with the number of private sector rental properties. I think I'm right in saying that he prefers to see more first-time buyers, fine, and he wants to see more social housing, fine. But he didn't seem to worry about the didn't know the number of private sector rental properties or the impact of state decisions like the 3% surcharge and other regulatory matters. Does the Chief Minister have any concerns about these issues? And is he going to take this issue quite seriously with the scale of numbers of private sector rental accommodation that is available, occupied by islanders, needed by islanders? And does he agree that actually we need to actually crowd it out?
Chief Minister.
Not sure what the Deputy means by crowded out.
Reduce it.
Thank you. So I did listen carefully to that question, and I'm aligned with the Housing Minister on this issue. It is one of our 13 priorities to provide more affordable homes for islanders, and that's not just to buy, but it is to rent. And I think the private sector does pay an important part of that. But in relation to looking medium to long term, the Deputy knows one of the big challenges, probably the biggest challenge this island has, is the fall in working population and the fertility rate, and it's important that we provide more affordable homes for young families. Young families, I believe, sir, majority of young local families want to be able to afford to buy their home and pay a mortgage, sir, rather than paying rent for the rest of their life, sir, and that is the strategy we're following.
Supplementary.
Can I just be absolutely clear, sir, that the Chief Minister is saying, we all know the housing needs assessment. We all know we need more homes. Everybody knows that. Supply is important. But is he actually saying he agrees with the policy of contracting the private sector rental market?
We don't have a policy, sir, to contract the private sector rental market. And the opening sentence in my answer, sir, was that we believe private sector rental is an important part of this island's offering. It's an important part of our economy, sir. So there is no plan or strategy to reduce that, sir. The strategy is to increase the availability of affordable homes for islanders to buy. Now, that could lead to a reduction in private sector rental. It could do, because it makes sense, sir, if we do the sums, that if more people are going to own their own homes, then less people are going to rent them.
Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. Could the Chief Minister clarify, Liscay Youth Centre, there was a £3.5 million allocation of funding, which has now been cut for the Liscay Centre. And I understand that the St Helier Youth Centre is now, funding is being provided for that. Has this been simply a case of prioritising the St Helier Youth Centre over Liscay? Could he confirm one way or the other?
Chief Minister.
Well, so I think this is a case of rescheduling. The Liscay youth work is extremely important, but we have identified we have almost a complete lack of facilities in the north of town. So it was deemed, sir, that we would prioritise the new youth centre in town slightly ahead of Liscay. But the plans are in there, sir, to do Liscay. It just means it will be delayed slightly, sir. But it's of no less importance. And we are, like I say, we're just trying to, I think we've highlighted the fact that there really is a dearth of youth facilities in the north of town, so we need to address that first.
Supplementary?
No, thank you, sir.
Deputy Tadier.
Sir, the States Assembly, and I think government by extension, has come under attack by a number of tabloid reports in both the print and TV media about questioning the value of our Parliament's adherence to interparliamentary bodies, and I think that can also go for intergovernmental bodies when it comes to the value that they bring and the attendance at conferences. Would the Chief Minister have a view to put out on whether our membership of these and participation of these bodies is, on balance, a good thing for Jersey, and if so, explain why?
I think it is an important part of our role within the parliamentary democracy that we share with other countries, not least those in the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. The interaction we have with fellow Assembly members and fellow parliamentarians, whether it's at a senior government level, interacting with other parliaments and visiting each other's jurisdictions is important. I think it helps us better understand how other jurisdictions work. We learn off that, so we bring that learning back in. It's also an opportunity to share what we do, share our unique parliamentary democracy, our unique systems with other jurisdictions, sir. And as long as we do that, sir, in a prudent and an appropriate way, which I believe we do, we carefully consider what we go to, sir. I think it's a good thing and we'll continue to support it.
So would the Chief Minister follow up by saying whether he thinks there would be reputational damage for Jersey in the wider sense if we were to simply say, actually, we don't want to be part of this, refuse invitations, because members started to get worried about some negative public reporting on it?
Well, sir, in this difficult world we live in, we don't want to isolate ourselves. We want to engage proactively with as many jurisdictions as we can.
Thank you. Any other questions for the Chief Minister? Deputy Brenner. Yes.
Yes, I will have a second bite of the cherry. The common strategic priorities also say that the 13th commitment is to meet the island's commitments to address the climate emergency through the implementation of the carbon neutral roadmap. Could the Minister express how he feels the government is achieving this?
Chief Minister.
I think I've got the question. Sorry, sir. We've accepted that the commitment to meet the island's commitments to address the climate emergency through the implementation of the carbon neutral roadmap, sir, which is progressing. I think we're due an update at some stage in the near future at Council of Ministers. But we accept that as a priority, as agreed in the Common Strategic Plan, and I'm relying on the Environment Minister to provide us with regular updates, notwithstanding we know that it is going to be a challenge to meet the targets that are set out, sir. But I've always stated it's better to have a target and not quite get there than not have a target at all and get nowhere near it, sir. But I like to reassure members that the commitment remains as stated in the CSP.
Supplementary?
Yes, sir. I wonder how he squares that with the decision not to implement the increase in the fuel duty that is the mechanism by which the carbon neutral roadmap will be delivered.
Well, so I think with the current contribution from fuel duty, that will still provide significant resources, sir. And again, we've had to balance our view on that with the challenges islanders are facing with the rising cost of living and RPI. So I'm afraid we have decided as a government that it's more important to bear down on that at the moment and look at we'll look after we get through, I think, this difficult economic period. We look at how we readdress the funding of carbon neutral roadmap then, sir. But in the meantime, I think it's important we assist islanders with the cost of living, sir.
Deputy Stevens.
Thank you, sir. In answer to an earlier question, the Chief Minister, referring to the budget, said it was the start of bringing our public finances back into line. What are the next steps and what's the long-term plan?
Chief Minister.
If I can, I was trying to look at some figures, sir, that looked at the actual expenditure from 2019, 2021. Expenditure reduced from 2021 to 2022, but then increased to over £1 billion in 2023, sir. The curbing of the growth, and I'll be responding to an earlier question clarifying from Deputy Gardner in an email during the lunchtime recess, sir, that says the growth in the budget is largely down to the increased pay awards and the increased health budget. If we strip it out, so the budget is pretty much, there's been no increase on the previous year. In light of the comments and the advice from the Fiscal Policy Panel, sir, I suggest this Assembly, the Government, and ultimately this Assembly is going to have to review those budgets and how we allocate spending in future years, sir, and that's something we're going to have to do over the course of the next 12 months.
Very quickly, sir, if I
Yes.
may squeeze it in. What would the Chief Minister say to those who may suggest that in terms of not just budgeting but policy as well, this government is maybe focused on the short term rather than the long term?
Chief Minister.
I say just the opposite, sir. The reason why we're not spending now, not spending is so we have a chance to remain prudent in the longer term. And that's why, sir, we're not taking for granted any increases in TAC through Pillar 2 revenue, sir, and we're being as prudent as we possibly can. But we know there has to be room for more prudence, as we've just seen in the rather stark report from the Fiscal Policy Panel.
Well, thank you, Chief Minister. That brings that period of questions to an end.
The adjournment, sir?
Members content to adjourn now? The Assembly stands adjourned until 2:15.